Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto married to Shito, goddess of the sun and fire, part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Clang. Crash. Crock-a-boom. Clang. Clang. Atop a blackened mountain, several figures could be seen locked in combat as a massive dark fortress seemed to be slowly building itself around them. A young girl with pitch black hair, wearing punk clothes, and wielding a spear and shield fought against an older teen boy with sandy blonde hair with an odd dual-colored sword. Another girl with similar black hair, a silvery hunting outfit, and a silver circlet on her brow was crouched next to an injured and bound blonde girl, shooting an expertly made silver-lined hunting bow towards our main focus. A seemingly young girl with auburn hair, silver eyes, and lightly tanned skin littered with cuts that oozed golden blood struggled to support two silver hunting blades as they blocked a massive bronze javelin. Said javelin was wielded by a tall, excessively muscular man wearing golden Greek armor with an arrogant smirk. These were Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, chastity, and the moon, and Atlas, the titan of strength and endurance respectively. "Do you now see the futility of your actions now, little goddess?" Atlas asked in a mocking tone as he slapped away an arrow that got close to his head and began to slowly apply more pressure. Artemis didn't verbally respond. Instead, she broke the blade lock and used the momentum to slip past his guard and slash at his back, withholding a groan as her weapons barely cut into his armor. "Soon you and your little companions shall be nothing more than a memory, a really bloody memory." He emphasized this with a grazing blow of his spear, making a long, shallow cut along Artemis's arm. "Damn it, I don't have enough time. I doubt Poseidon's son can hold the sky for much longer," Artemis thought, briefly glancing behind the titan to see a boy with spiky black hair and seafoam green eyes as he struggled to literally hold the sky in the air. She knew that it was only a matter of minutes before the weight became too much for him, and he was crushed. The goddess of the hunt was snapped out of her thoughts as she instinctually dodged out of the way of a jab that would have skewered her torso. Don't you know better than to get distracted during a fight? But of course, what would a pathetic woman know of real fighting anyway, "Oh my, did I hurt your feelings? Are you gonna cry to daddy now?" Atlas said in a mocking sad tone as he smirked at the suddenly immobile goddess. Snap! Faster than the mighty titan could even blink, Artemis was right in front of his face with her now brightly glowing blades lodged deep into his shoulders, her face set into one of cold fury, as she then proceeded to slash and hack at every bit of exposed flesh she could reach. "Gah! Damn bitch! Get the fuck off me!" Atlas screamed as he tried to pry the pissed goddess off his face, only for his hands to get repelled with wild stabs and slashes whenever they got near. Finally having enough, he changed tactics and barreled straight through several walls and then body slamming head first into the floor, creating a moderately sized crater. Slowly getting back to his feet with a sneer as the wounds across his face swiftly healed shut, the general raised his weapon high to strike at the dazed goddess. "Enjoy the taste of oblivion, you little bghh." Atlas was cut off as a single silver arrow lodged itself into one of the still healing wounds on his hand, causing him to lose his grip on the javelin as it fell to the ground with a clatter. "Girl, I was going to save you for last, my traitorous offspring," he growled out as he slowly turned towards the bow-wielding girl with a snarl. "But now I'm gonna rip you limb from limb, Gaia, damn it," he howled as Artemis lodged her blades deep into his back. Caught by surprise, he was unable to resist in time as she shoved him towards the struggling boy. Realizing what she was doing, the titan's power flared as he tried to stop himself before it was too late. Having none of this, Artemis funneled her energy into her arms and pushed. "Lady Artemis! Look out!" Head snapping in the direction of the two shouts, the goddess was just in time to see the blonde boy just a few feet away with his odd sword descending towards her head with a sickly yellow glow. Pulling one of her knives free, she raised it up just in time to block the blade a mere inch from her head. "You shall not stop us! Olympus shall fall!" the boy yelled as the glow around his sword brightened dramatically. Artemis's eyes widened dramatically as she got a good feel of the energy that the blade was giving off. Kronos. Knowing how dangerous her grandfather's power could be, the goddess was about to pull her blade back when a bright light suddenly blinded everyone in the vicinity. When the light cleared, Atlas was lying face first in the ground with the sky on his back, the boy that was just in his place not too far away gasping desperately for breath, and the blonde boy stood with his blade embedded into the ground. Artemis was nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, today sucked, a short boy with spiky blonde hair, sapphire blue eyes, tan skin, and 3 whisker-like markings on each cheek groaned as he marched into a small apartment. Slamming the door shut behind him, he shuffled across the room and flopped into a small recliner with a tired sigh. This was Naruto Uzumaki, 12-year-old orphan, prankster king from hell, self-declared future Hokage and current failure of the Ninja Academy. For the second time now, he had failed the final test because he still couldn't perform a Bunshin no Jutsu, the most basic of clone techniques. Stupid jutsu, why doesn't it ever work for me? He wondered aloud. No matter how much he practiced, no matter how long he trained, that jutsu would always turn out a flop whenever he attempted the technique. The best he had ever gotten was a single dead-looking clone that would collapse immediately after forming. The worst part for him was how all the other students would laugh like crazy each time he failed, mocking and teasing him while he just stood there with a fake smile, declaring he would prove that he would be the best. He loved the attention, hell he practically lived for it, but just once he wanted someone to pay attention because they were proud of him. Well, there's always tomorrow, Naruto thought with a smile as he stood back up. His apartment was small, only consisting of a living room with attached kitchenette, a bathroom, and a bedroom. It never bothered him though, it was his home and he was happy with the way it was. Right now, he was shuffling around the kitchenette, looking around for his favorite comfort food. Opening the cupboard, his smile turned to a frown as he saw only a single package of instant ramen sitting all by its lonesome. Grown great, have to go shopping later, Naruto grumbled as he grabbed the solitary package and set it on the counter as he got to work boiling some water. 5 minutes later, he was back in his recliner with a steaming cup of ramen in hand and a rare relaxed expression on his face as he watched a cheesy action movie on his small TV. Gently blowing on the ramen to cool it down, Naruto used a pair of disposable chopsticks to raise the noodly goodness to mouth. Just as he was about to take his first bite though, he was blinded by a sudden flash of yellow and silver light as a sudden weight fell onto his lap. When his vision cleared, he found himself looking straight into the silver eyes of a visibly stunned unknown girl as she straddled his lap. Pretty was the last thing he thought before he felt a sudden jolt of pain in his neck and everything went black. Artemis looked down at the unconscious boy beneath her. She had knocked him out purely by reflex, but not before she had seen the surprise and confusion in his eyes as he looked at her. He had clearly not known who she is, so was likely not an enemy. That being said, where in Tartarus am I? She wondered as she looked around the small apartment with confusion. Attempting to focus her power into her senses, Artemis suddenly collapsed due to her exhaustion having caught up with her. Relifting herself off the blonde beneath her, the goddess's equivalent of adrenaline finally wore off and she felt her numerous injuries ache. Her breathing became uneven, her vision started blurring, and her entire body trembled violently as realization finally hit her. She was almost completely out of energy, only having enough to barely keep herself conscious. With this came the harsh truth: she was entirely defenseless, badly injured, and in an entirely unknown area. I need to get somewhere safe to regain my strength before making my way back to Olympus, she thought as she tried to climb off the boy only to collapse again. Yeah, how in Tartarus am I supposed to do that when I can barely move? Artemis knew she didn't have the time to waste. It probably wouldn't be long before Kronos' followers sent someone or something to hunt her down while she was weakened. Think Artemis, think, she said to herself as she took a deep breath. You're wounded, exhausted, and probably being hunted, huh? So this is what my prey feel like, gah. Focus. I need somewhere to hide, somewhere to rest, somewhere nobody would think to look. Her thoughts ground to a halt as she looked down at the boy she landed on, an idea slowly forcing itself to the front of her mind. As a goddess, she had many abilities, most of which were linked to her respective domains. However, there was one that all gods she knew of could, but almost never did use. Desperate times call for desperate measures, I guess, she thought with a sigh while leaning down until she was face to face with the unconscious child. You should be honored, as you will be allowed a privilege that no man has ever had, she told him despite knowing he couldn't hear, before doing something that would make every one of her hunters have a heart attack. She kissed him. The moment their lips connected, however, her entire body glowed a bright silver and dispersed into particles that soaked into the boy's body. The only proof she was ever there being a few drops of golden ichor. Inside what appeared to be a dimly lit sewer tunnel, a swarm of silver particles collected until they formed the familiar childlike shape of the goddess of the hunt. Panting in exhaustion, Artemis slowly took in her new surroundings. Rather grungy for a child's soul, she commented with mild concern before slowly stumbling to the side of the tunnel and sitting down against the brick wall with a tired sigh, glad that the water her legs were submerged in appeared to be mostly clean. Focusing the absolute last of her strength, a light blue translucent aura formed in the air and started sinking into her body as she began gently siphoning the ambient energy all around into herself. Nifty fact, all living things had a soul, and that soul was practically a bundle of pure energy condensed into one spot. If one knew how and had the means to do so, they could harness this power in a variety of ways. In this case, Artemis was cautiously draining a small amount of this energy at a continuous rate from the boy to restore her own power, as she rested. This was why other gods and goddesses never used this ability, as they found the idea of needing a mere mortal's power insulting and or blasphemous. Imagine her surprise though when she was met with the veritable sea of energy emanating from the boy. Just my luck, a demigod, she thought. That was the only explanation she could think of for how a mere child had so much raw power overflowing from him. What was odd, however, was she couldn't tell whose child he was, something she could do almost instinctually due to her being the goddess of the hunt, but simply chalked it up to her present state of fatigue. Deeming it not important for the time being, Artemis finally allowed her eyes to close as she fell asleep for the first time in 300 years. Because of that, she missed both the aura around her gaining slight flecks of reddish purple and how a series of black lines started forming on the walls, pulsing with a vibrant blue light. Elsewhere in the sewer/Soul's Cape, the lines kept forming until they reached an unimaginably massive gateway. It was at least 4 stories tall and half as wide, and on the middle bars where the gate would open was a single piece of paper with the kanji 4CO written on it. Transitioning to the floor, the lines shot toward these bars and rapidly curled up until they reached the paper. When they made contact, the paper started glowing the same color before it gave off a sudden burst of light. When it cleared, it revealed a beautiful woman with vibrant red hair that reached her waist, violet eyes, and wearing a green dress with white collar and short sleeves. She looked around the area in apparent confusion until they settled on the glowing lines. In less than a second, her confusion turned to rage, her hair rising into the air in 9 waving bunches as massive golden chains emerged from her back and shot down the tunnel the lines originated from. Back with Artemis. The goddess of the moon was awoken from her slumber, as several golden chains suddenly wrapped themselves around her. Surprised, Artemis had no chance to try and break free before she was repeatedly bashed into the floor and walls until she lost consciousness again. Unknown amount of time later. Artemis's eyes slowly flickered open as she sat up with a groan. Sitting up from the shallow water she was laying in, she winced from a strong jolt of pain that shot through her skull. On reflex, she started to reach up with one hand to rub her head. Clatter. Only to freeze as she saw the golden metal chain now bound to her wrist. What in Tartarus? She mentally shouted as she looked herself over and found similar bindings on her other wrist, both her ankles, her waist, and around her neck. Following the chains with her eyes, she was just in time to see a red-headed woman as she finished wrapping the ends of the chains around the bars of a massive gate in an extremely complex pattern. When she finished, the chains gained a slight blue and red aura before returning to normal. Turning around, the redhead's violet eyes locked with hers before a vicious grin crossed her lips. Well, look who's finally awake," she said in a mocking tone as she slowly approached the restrained goddess while loudly cracking her knuckles. "Now, little miss," she grabbed Artemis by the collar and hoisted her to eye level. "While I'd love nothing more than to pummel you until you answer my questions, such as what the hell you're doing inside my son's mind, I don't have that kind of time." As if to prove her point, her body began flickering out of existence for a few moments before stabilizing. "But given how you were sucking up Naruto-chan's chakra like a leech, I can guess you aren't here for good reasons." Artemis tried to speak but was unable to as the woman's grip tightened drastically around her neck. "Not only that, thanks to you I won't ever be able to see my baby boy once he's older. And that really pisses me off, Tebane." All Artemis could do was choke out incoherent noises as she grasped desperately at her throat, her face beginning to pale. "But given that I can't kill you, and trust me I tried many times while you were out cold, I did the next best thing," the redhead explained as her form started flickering at a much more rapid pace. "I hope you like it here, cause you're going to be staying for a long, long time." As soon as she finished speaking, the woman faded away completely, allowing Artemis to fall back to the ground with a splash. For several minutes, all she could do was lay there with her hands at her throat as she desperately gasped for breath. When she finally did recover, the goddess slowly stood up on slightly shaky legs as her restraints jingled loudly. Looking down at said restraints, a look of anger crossed her face as she scoffed. "I may be weakened, but did that woman really think mere chains would hold a goddess?" she asked rhetorically as she started to pull at the chains with her godly string. "Zzzzzzzzzztjaya." She collapsed back to the ground in agony as the arrangement of chains lit up like a Christmas tree with red and blue electricity coursed up the bindings and into her body. Artemis writhed around in the water as the volts kept flooding through her for several seconds before tapering out. This left her on the ground gasping again. "I guess those mere chains are more problematic than you thought, huh, goddess?" a booming voice called out, saying goddess in a mocking tone. Turning her head towards the source, the goddess of the hunt's eyes widened dramatically as she saw the massive creature on the other side of the bars. It was a giant fox with blood-red fur, equally red slit-pupilled eyes, black markings around its eyes and mouth, and 9 long tails. A deep growl emanated from its throat, causing the whole sewer to shake. The whole thing would have been more intimidating though if nearly every inch of the fox wasn't restrained by chains many times larger than the ones on her. The body was held to the floor while its tails were pinned to the walls of the cage. What are you?" Artemis asked in mild fright as she scurried away from the cage. She could feel the raw power rolling off it, and it was comparable to the mighty Typhon himself. "Me? I am the Kyubi no Kitsune, strongest of the Biju and pure hate incarnate. That is all you need to know, Nigen," it said blandly before seemingly going to sleep. Seeing as she probably wasn't going to get anything other than that, Artemis decided not to press her luck and chose to focus on gathering her strength instead. Placing herself as far as possible from the Kyubi, she found a small, raised platform that stuck out of the shin-high water that she laid down on. Examining her restraints, she noticed as a trace amount of the red energy was seeping from them into herself. While this was giving her strength, she also felt a similar amount of her own power being drained from herself and released into the surrounding area, represented by a soft silver glow. Sighing in frustration, Artemis attempted to get as comfortable as she could on the slab of stone with the metallic bindings on her. Setting her head down, she drifted back into an uneasy slumber. Morning, Naruto's apartment. Naruto woke up with a yawn, rubbing his eyes tiredly as he sat up in his recliner with mild confusion. What am I doing out here?" he wondered aloud, rubbing the sleep out of one eye as he looked around his living room before spotting the still-turned-on television as it played static. Oh, must have dozed off. With that mystery solved, he stood and stretched the kinks out of his muscles before throwing away the now inedible cup of ramen with a sad look. Looking up at the clock hanging on the wall, he found it to be 8:27 in the morning. Well, time for a shower, then shopping, he thought with a grimace. At least I don't have to worry about school for a few weeks. Yawn, what is all this racket? Naruto yelped as he heard the unfamiliar voice ring through his head. Who said that? He demanded as his eyes darted all over the room. Ugh! Stop with that yelling, boy, I already have a headache as it is, the voice said in an irritated tone. Hey! Don't tell me what to do! Naruto yelled as he continued to search all over the place for the source of the voice. Who are you? Where are you? What are you doing in my home? He demanded. You can stop looking, you won't find me anywhere, boy. And I said stop yelling. The voice yelled back, making Naruto cringe as the sound echoed through his skull. Fine, but at least answer my questions. And stop calling me boy, my name's Naruto Uzumaki and you better remember it to bail. Mindscape. Artemis's eyebrow twitched as she saw everything Naruto saw thanks to a large hologram-like screen floating in front of her. So that woman really was his mother, she thought as her hand reflexively went to her still bruised throat. Reality. Alright then boy, Naruto grit his teeth, my name is Artemis. As for where I am, here's a hint, I know exactly what you're thinking. What I'm thinking? But that impossible unless you were in my head. Wait a minute, Naruto's eyes widened as it hit him. You're in my head? Exactly, the now named Artemis stated bluntly. Why are you in my head? Get out! Naruto yelled while gripping his head. Trust me, I would love to do exactly that but I can't. Why not? What did I just tell you about yelling? Naruto's jaw snapped shut just as he was about to yell again when he heard the dangerous tone in Artemis's voice. Also think when you're talking to me, otherwise others are going to think you're going crazy. Well, last I checked, hearing voices inside your head was a pretty sure sign of someone going crazy. Naruto thought back in a snarky tone. Touché, but still, I highly doubt you want people noticing so. Not unless you want a one-way venture to an insane asylum, Artemis said, causing Naruto to grumble in reluctant agreement. Alright, you do have a point there, great, I'm agreeing with the voice in my head. Naruto groaned as he collapsed back into his chair. Congratulations, Naruto, you have officially gone crazy. And now, 1 year later. Beep, 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 click. A lightly tanned arm shot out from under a bundle of blankets and smacked the beeping alarm clock. A soft groan replaced the irritating noise as Naruto's head partially emerged from the mess with half-lidded eyes to glare at the glowing numbers on the clock. He stared at it for a full minute before collapsing back onto his bed. Ugh, 5 more minutes. Don't bother trying, Naruto, you need to be on time for the finals today. Artemis's voice called within his mind, making Naruto groan again. Now get up. Alright, I'm up, Artie-nichan, Naruto grumbled as he finally climbed out of bed. With the blankets no longer covering him and the fact he was only wearing a pair of boxer shorts, you could now see a few differences in his appearance. He was about an inch or so taller, his cheeks were a little less chubby, and his musculature was more toned and slimmer looking. However, the most noticeable changes would be to his hair and eyes. The former was from the streaks of auburn cropping out here and there, and the latter due to the multitude of silvery flecks now in them, giving his eyes a literal sparkle effect when in direct light. Stretching his arms with a yawn, Naruto slowly stumbled out of his room and into his living room, where he was greeted with the sight of a fair-skinned, black-haired, black-eyed, color-not-bruise, woman wearing a bluish-black kimono with white trim reading a small scroll. She was sitting on one side of a new-looking love seat sat in front of television along with an equally new coffee table that had 2 plates of food sat on it. Upon seeing her, Naruto instantly perked up before quickly rushing over and hugging the woman tightly around the waist. "Morning, Shizen-ichin," he said excitedly as the now-named Shizen looked down at him with a smile, while she rolled up her scroll and returned the affection. "Morning, Naruto, how are you and your roommate doing today?" she asked somewhat hesitantly after they separated while pointing towards her own head. As soon as the words left her lips, Naruto's eye color suddenly shifted, changing to almost pure silver with flecks of blue. "I do have a name, Shizen, I'd appreciate if you'd use it." Artemis's soft but strong voice came out of Naruto's mouth. "Sorry, Artemis, still getting used to all of this." Yep, she knew about Naruto's other soul roomie. "How?" you may ask. Well, that would be for the same reason she's in Konoha and not wandering around the elemental nations with Tsunade, the legendary sucker senju. You see, it turns out housing the goddess of the moon inside your soul while some of her power is gradually being dispersed into your body has a few side effects. The hair and eyes were again the most obvious of them, but there were more less obvious but problematic issues. His muscle development was becoming more lean and compact, thus giving him a slightly feminine figure, and it was now a bit harder for Naruto to read as the kanji in books or scrolls would seem to become slightly distorted for him. The most prominent issue though was how the blonde redhead, auburn is a reddish-brown, now felt completely restless and energetic at night, making it impossible for him to sleep no matter how hard he tried. It got so bad that it was only a matter of time that it drew attention, specifically from Naruto's favorite teacher Iruka. 10 months ago, Shinobi, Ninja, Academy. Iruka was a young man with darkly tanned skin, brown hair, and a long horizontal scar going across his nose. He was also a very dedicated teacher who cared deeply for the well-being of his students, especially given the profession they were training for. It was because of this that he didn't tolerate slacking off of goofing around from his students while they were in his class. So when he saw the trouble student, class clown, and resident prankster of his class Naruto with his face planted firmly against his desk while softly snoring during his lessons, again, he was understandably a bit upset. With a vein bulging on his forehead, he marched across the classroom while ignoring his other students whispering and snickering at the blonde's soon-to-be misfortune. When he got to Naruto's desk, he slammed his fist onto the boy's desk, making him shoot back up with a start. "Naruto! How many times have I told you not to sleep in class? You need to take this seriously." Iruka started his scolding strong but trailed off near the end as he got a good look at Naruto's face. Dark bags sat under his eyes, his face was pale, and overall looked ready to pass out again any second. "Sorry, Iruka-sensei, I'm just having some trouble getting enough thump just like that." Present. At first Iruka had thought Naruto had just been overworking himself and had told him off later for doing so at the nurse's office, despite the blonde claiming otherwise. It wasn't until a few days after that incident that he started to believe his student when he saw Naruto not only still sluggish and exhausted in class but stopped pretty much everything he usually did. No pranks, no ditching class, no hanging out with Kiba, Shikamaru, or Choji. His seemingly endless amounts of energy he was known for just seemed to be gone. The final nail in the coffin was when he missed going to Ichiraku's when they had a completely free ramen eating contest. After that, Iruka wasted no time bringing the matter to the Hokage, Fire Shadow, Hiruzen, the leader of Konohagakure, village hidden in the leaves, and Naruto's grandfather figure. Not even an hour later and Naruto found himself in a hospital room as several tests were being done on him to figure out what was wrong. They even had some weird guy with long white hair and red marks on his face examine his stomach for several minutes while he channeled chakra for some reason. After several days of exams, questions, and observation, not only had they not been able to figure out what was wrong, but that is when they started noticing all the other little changes he'd been going through. With the case only getting more complex as time passed, and in his worry for his surrogate grandson's health, Hiruzen called the one person who could possibly find out the problem to come back to the village, one Tsunade Senju, also known as the world's best medical nin. The big problem with that, Tsunade hated Konoha since her brother and lover both died while serving the village as shinobi. After their deaths, she had left with her lover's niece Shizen while vowing never to set foot in the place again. However, Hiruzen wasn't known as the professor for nothing and had quickly found a way to force her back, by striking her where it hurts the most for gamblers. 8.5 months ago, Hokage's office. Hiruzen sat calmly in his office smoking a pipe, dressed in the official Hokage attire with a relaxed expression on his wrinkled face as he stared expectantly at the door. He didn't even flinch when said door suddenly exploded into pieces of wooden shrapnel that went flying, embedding themselves several inches into the walls, floor, ceiling, and furniture while somehow completely missing him. Standing where the poor innocent carved chunk of oak used to be was a tall blonde woman with sharp brown eyes locked in a glare, pale skin, a diamond tattoo on her forehead, and a ridiculously large bust. Bow chicka bow wow. God damn it, Tucker, this is the wrong story. Dude, as long as there are hot ladies around, I'm always in the right story. Facepalm. She wore a short gray kimono with blue edging, short blue pants, and a long green jacket with the kanji for gamble inside a red circle on the back. Standing behind her with a nervous and apologetic expression was none other than Shizen, still wearing the same outfit, only now holding a small pig in her arms. Hiruzen! The woman yelled as she literally stomped into the office with the force of an elephant, shaking the whole building and leaving spiderweb cracks under each foot. Why the hell did you freeze up my bank accounts and force me to come back here? She demanded, slamming her hands so hard against his desk that if it wasn't for the reinforcement seals on it the whole thing would have been turned to splinters. I promise it is important, Hiruzen said in a calm, even tone, not once faltering under the wrath of his old student. There is an odd medical case that needs your expertise to figure you. No! Tsunade cut him off. There is no way I am helping this kami-forsaken village after all that it has taken from me. Hiruzen sighed at that while rubbing his forehead in annoyance. Tsunade, it has been almost 30 years since Dan and Iwaki's deaths, you need to. He was cut off once again, this time from a fist heading towards his face. Don't you dare say their GH. Tsunade had started to yell again, only for her to be cut off this time when Hiruzen stopped the punch cold by catching her wrist. Then, with blinding speed, the seemingly harmless old man struck her several times in the torso with Hyuga-like precision and speed using his free hand. Stunned and gasping for breath, the blonde woman was left completely defenseless to the chop against her forehead that sent her stumbling back until she fell into a chair that appeared behind her in a puff of smoke. Shut up. Stay seated. Listen. Hiruzen said sternly once she recovered, fixing Tsunade with a fierce glare and wave of killing intent, that froze her in place. As I was saying, it has been nearly 30 years since their deaths. You've had more than enough time to mourn and move on, yet instead you are insistent on spitting on their memory with your self-destructive lifestyle. Don't even bother denying it, you know that is exactly what you're doing, he said, his glare hardening even further when his student tried to argue back. I was planning on just having you do this case and then be on your way, but your reaction at even mentioning it has changed that. It was true, all he wanted was her to find out what was wrong with Naruto, and then she could leave. However, looking at his former student sitting before him, the old man decided it was finally time to put his foot down on another matter while she was here. From now on, you are considered an active kunoichi and your Sannin travel rights are hereby revoked. You will also be required to go see a therapist on a regularity of at least once every 2 weeks. If you try to leave for anything other than an authorized mission, I will not only have the Senju accounts liquidated and the money dispersed to the various clans of the village, but also have you marked as a missing nin. What? You can't do that! Tsunade screamed in horror as she stood up from her seat, only to get nailed right on her tattoo with a paperweight that knocked her right back down. I am the Hokage, my word is law, Hiruzen stated bluntly, making the woman growl angrily and grit her teeth, but she didn't move from her seat. Now on to the case you so quickly rejected. Opening one of the drawers of his desk, the old man pulled out a manila envelope that he then tossed over to still pissed woman. Tsunade caught it by reflex, holding it in the air for a few seconds before reluctantly bringing it closer and opening it. Pulling out the small stack of paper inside, she quickly glanced over the contents of the first page before her eyebrows started twitching. An insomnia case? All of this over a fucking kid having trouble sleeping? She asked through clenched teeth. At first glance that is what it would seem, yes, Hiruzen said, but I'd suggest you keep reading before allowing that temper of yours to get any hotter. Knowing there was no point in arguing at this point, Tsunade simply grumbled loudly while flipping the page. Her griping continued for a whole of 10 seconds after that before slowly tapering off as her eyes darted over the piece of processed wood. By the time she was finished with the third page, her anger had seemingly completely dissipated as she became completely focused on what was written with a raised brow while waving her apprentice over. In Uzumaki, go figure, they always have the weird conditions, better yet a Jinchuriki. A foreign silver-colored chakra presence not from the Kyubi, which according to the pervert is under even heavier lockdown than it used to be somehow. Shifting body tone, changing eye and hair color, and unusual brain activity. Okay, I'll admit I'm interested. Present. After being effectively coerced into staying, Tsunade spent a day going over the various notes and test results before actually meeting with Naruto and doing some tests herself. Unfortunately, since she was still in a very bad mood from being forced to stay, she ended up making a snarky comment about the Hokage position while in the boy's presence. Given how Naruto aspired to be in said position, this went about as well as you could imagine. 8.5 months ago, hospital. It was the middle of the night, and Tsunade was standing over Naruto's bed with a clipboard, writing down some notes from the results of a jutsu she just used to scan the activity and chakra flow to his brain. The Hokage position is a fool's job, for those looking for an early grave. The busted blonde said pessimistically after hearing the boy talk about how he would become the leader of the village. Take that back, you stupid hag! Naruto shouted, looking and feeling a lot better now that he'd been able to get some sleep during the day. Looking down at him with a smug smirk, Tsunade leaned forward until she was face to face with the boy and said 2 words. Make me. Damn it, where the hell is room 315 again? Shizen asked herself as she wandered through the hospital with a large cup of coffee in hand. She'd been sent to fetch one by Tsunade and had ended up getting turned around in the large building. After several more minutes of searching, she finally gave up and stopped a nearby nurse to ask for directions. Oh, you want that boy's room? The nurse, an elderly woman with fair skin but graying brown hair, asked with a disgusted expression, like she just heard or saw something disgusting. Down that hall, take a left, 5th door to the left, she said quickly before hurrying away. Having been informed of her teacher's patient's other condition, Shizen had a good idea behind why the woman acted like that and had to restrain the urge to punch her. Instead, she just followed the directions she was given and soon arrived at the room she wanted. Upon entering, though, the cup in Shizen's grip slipped free and fell to the floor with a small crash as the raven-haired woman stared at the scene before her in shock. Af. Get the fuck off me, you little fucking bastard! Tsunade screamed, attempting to pry Naruto off of her chest while the boy gave her a double purple nurple. After that day, when the Umbu and medical staff who witnessed this told others of what happened, Naruto was unanimously declared the bravest person in all of Konoha. Present. Once she managed to separate the two, and prevent Tsunade from turning her patient into a bloody smear, Shizen introduced herself and managed to hit it off rather well with the energetic blonde. Naruto liking how Shizen was caring but also understanding, allowing him to get up and stretch his legs when he was feeling restless or simplifying things that he had trouble understanding. Meanwhile, Shizen liked Naruto for his blunt honesty and straightforward attitude. Naturally, it wasn't long until Naruto saw the kind woman as the sister he always wanted. Since then, she ended up acting as the mediator between him and Tsunade whenever they were in the same room. Whenever she left them alone, the two were at each other's throats within minutes. In the meantime, Tsunade was able to figure out what was wrong with his sleeping issue after a few weeks along with other things. 6.5 months ago, Hokage's office. A second being also sealed inside of Naruto? Hiruzen asked Tsunade as he looked up from the report on his desk. It makes the most sense, there's no other way that foreign chakra would still be circulating in his chakra system otherwise. Tsunade said, I even had the Gaki completely isolated from anyone but myself and Shizen for an entire week just to make sure nobody was injecting the stuff into him manually. While she spoke, the blonde pulled out a specific sheet from the report for the Hokage to see. Not only did it remain consistent, the amount circulating has actually been increasing, roughly by an estimate of 0.05% every 3 weeks. Hiruzen's brow furrowed at this as he read over the data. Is there any way to get rid of it or stop it from getting worse? He asked, only to sigh when Tsunade shook her head. Not unless you want to seal off his entire chakra network, Tsunade said sarcastically. Besides, at this point it's doing him more good than bad. How in Kami's name is making him unable to sleep good? Hiruzen demanded sternly. Correction, he is unable to sleep at night, Tsunade said with a smirk, making her sensei blink in surprise. Excuse me? Tsunade's grin widened at his baffled response. It wasn't every day one surprised the shinobi no Kami, god of shinobi. You heard me, he can't sleep at night. This silver chakra has altered the brain's neural and hormonal activity for sleeping, effectively making him nocturnal. She explained. It's actually a rather easy fix, just have to prescribe him a few meds for sleep. Hiruzen continued to stare at her blankly for several seconds before finally responding with a tired sigh. I'm getting too old for this shit, what do we do next then? At this point, Tsunade finally lost her smug look, being replaced with a frown. Next, we find the best Yamanaka you have and have them do something really stupid. You honestly don't mean? That's exactly what I mean. Few hours later, hospital. Just for the record, This is by far the stupidest thing you have ever asked me to do. One Inoichi Yamanaka, head of the Yamanaka clan, said as he stood inside a hospital room with Tsunade, Hiruzen, Jiraiya, white-haired man with red lines on face, and a very heavily sedated Naruto. You want me to send someone into a Jinchuriki's mind? Into the Kyuubi Jinchuriki's mind? Not just someone, me. Tsunade said, we need to find the source of that unknown chakra, and the only way we're going to be able to that is from within the Gaki's mind where the spiritual half of the seal resides. Or at least that's what the pervert says. She finished while jabbing her thumb at Jiraiya. I told you I'm not a pervert. I'm a super perv crack. Crash. Whatever you say, I just want it to be known that I think this is a very bad idea. The blonde man said, ignoring the twitching man in the wall while going through a quick string of hand seals and placing a hand on Tsunade and Naruto's shoulders. Main Dobodai Retenso no Jutsu, mind-body coil transfer technique. Noted. Was the last thing Tsunade heard from Hiruzen before everything went white. Mindscape seal. Artemis sat on her little platform with a bland look as she patiently waited for her company. Just because Naruto wasn't conscious doesn't mean his senses stopped working, so she was able to hear everything that had just been discussed. Sure enough, not even a minute later Tsunade's form appeared in a small flare of blue light, facing away from the seal. The busted blonde stumbled slightly from disorientation for a few seconds until her senses stabilized, and she caught herself. Once she got her bearings, Tsunade quickly started taking in her surroundings. I've heard of having your head in the gutter, but isn't this a little extreme? I had a similar thought when I first arrived here. The instant Artemis's voice reached the blonde's ears, Tsunade whirled around with her fists raised. Upon seeing the child-looking goddess on her stone bed with her golden bindings, the in-disguise elderly woman's eyebrow rose, but her stance never wavered. Who the hell are you? Would you like the long version or the short? Present. Artemis told Tsunade her full story, figuring lying would get her nowhere at that point. Sadly for her, while the medic believed the part on how she got chained to the seal, the rest was considered pure imagination. Tsunade had ended up deeming her as the result of a split personality that had fully developed into a different person, with her unique chakra being simply an unusual mixture of Naruto's and Kyuubi's. On the plus side though, she was deemed not a threat and Naruto was released from the hospital with some meds to help with his sleeping issue. Though it did come with the condition that Shizen check up on the duo regularly, something Naruto was really happy about and Artemis didn't mind much. That is understandable, but I would still prefer if you referred to me by my name, Artemis said plainly before Naruto's eyes reverted to normal. Blinking a few times then squinting slightly, the blonde's hand quickly rose to rub his head while an annoyed groan escaped his lips. Would you please warn me before you do that? Gives me a headache from hell when you don't. He mentally grumbled. Oh, it isn't that bad, now quit your griping and hurry up, unless you want to be late, Artemis said back, making Naruto snap to attention. Oh crap. I almost forgot, he shouted, grabbing his plate and quickly wolfing down the contents. He then ran into his room and swiftly changed into his usual outfit, only now having a pair of dagger holsters that hung empty around his waist. Rushing back out, he gave Shizen another hug before heading for the door. I'll see you later, Shizen-ichin, Naruto yelled with a wave. Of course, Otuto, don't forget the deal, Shizen called to him, getting a thumbs up from the whiskered blonde just as the door closed. Said deal was simply, if Naruto could do well enough on every other portion of the final ninja exam, then the third would excuse his inability to do the Bunshin no Jutsu and allow him to graduate. It was an idea proposed by Shizen herself after seeing how badly the boy struggled with chakra control thanks to his much larger than average reserves of chakra. Even with all the usual glares and dark whispers around him, Naruto didn't drop the smirk from his face as he rushed through town. He was confident he could pass this time as both Shizen and Artemis had given him tips on physical practice, and while he was still terrible at written tests, Artemis could cover for him there thanks to the mass amounts of studying she had done through Naruto while trying to figure out how to get back home. Speaking of which, ever since she'd taken a look at a map of the elemental nations, the goddess of the hunt had the feeling she was much farther away from home than a simple boat ride could cover. This feeling was further cemented when Artemis was unable to find a single recognizable constellation in the night sky the entire year she'd been in this situation, and given she was responsible for making about 2/3 of them, that was a very big deal. She knew there was the possibility of other worlds. As a goddess, the impossible for most was a very real possibility for Artemis, but never in her long life had she or any of her siblings had ever actually gone to one before. The likelihood that she was actually trapped in one of these alternate worlds only became higher and higher as each day passed as she learned more about her current surroundings. Back to topic, Naruto finally arrived at the academy with some time to spare, so he slowed his pace to walk as he entered through the main doors. Passing through the various hallways, he soon found himself inside the familiar classroom he'd been educated in for the last year. Half the seats were filled already, but with a quick glance around the room he spotted his lazy buddy Shikamaru at one of the back seats already asleep. Taking a seat next to him, the ponytailed boy briefly opened one eye a quarter of the way, just enough to confirm who was next to him before going back to sleep. Not long after that, Choji, a plump boy with a kind heart, and Kiba, a feral-looking boy with red tattoos on his face and a small white puppy in his arms, arrived and took the seats on Shikamaru's other side and in front of Naruto respectively. Then just 5 minutes before class started, Sasuke, a broody angsty boy with hair shaped like a duck's ass, showed up with an irritated look. That irritation was soon explained as a group of girls followed in from behind him and repeatedly professing their love for him. The ever-dreaded fangirls, led by Ino, a pretty blonde girl, and Sakura, a smart pink-haired girl and Naruto's crush. As soon as he arrived, Sasuke shot across the room and took the only unoccupied space with no opening around it, which happened to be right next to Naruto. This caused the horde of hormonal girls to groan as one while slowly dispersing into their seats, with some occasionally sending glares at the whiskered boy like it was somehow his fault. Having dealt with worse all his life though, Naruto was easily able to ignore the angry looks as Iruka walked into the room and gave his usual speech before quickly passing out the written portion of the test with his assistant Mizuki. "Looks like you're up, Artie-nichan," Naruto thought as his eyes switched to silver again and he raised his pen. "You may start your test now." A solitary target swung through the air in an erratic pattern between several trees. It was held up by a thin, almost invisible wire that lightly glinted in the sunlight. The target itself was just barely the size of a person's palm with the 3 separate black and white rings. Whoosh thump. And now had an arrow embedded deeply into it that pinned it to the tree it was tied to, just missing the bullseye by a few centimeters. Meanwhile, a little over 200 yards away, Naruto gave a small cheer as he lowered his arms. He was wielding a plain wooden bow that Artemis had helped him make, and a quiver of arrows rested against his thigh. He was still wearing the same clothes as earlier, the only difference being a blue headband with a metal plate depicting a stylized leaf wrapped around his noggin. "You're improving well, but you still need to work on lining up your shots faster," Artemis said, her voice stern but with a bit of pride edging it. Naruto just grinned brightly at that, used to her half-compliments. Besides, he was still in a good mood from passing the final exam yesterday. "That's the understatement of the century. Remember when you first tried to teach me archery?" he asked with a grin. "Humph, how could I forget? You missed your first shot by a mile, and the arrow somehow ended up hitting that annoying old pervert right in the ass," Artemis said with a chuckle while Naruto burst into laughter. "Oh man, Ero-sennin was so pissed about that. Thank Kami he fell for the Oroku no Jutsu, sexy technique. Naruto thought as the moon goddess's smirk dropped, and she growled lightly. "While I admit it does have its uses, I still despise that invention of yours," she said, her teeth grinding together in irritation. Truthfully, the only reason she even tolerated that jutsu was the fact that her landlord was as dense as a diamond and tended completely miss anything perverted, or love-related in general, unless it was blatantly said to him. A prime example being his total obliviousness towards a certain blue-haired fellow student's infatuation with him. Speaking of which, one Hinata Hyuga, a fellow graduate of Naruto's class, slowly walked into view with a paper bag in her arms as Naruto was lining up with another target that was a bit closer. She had short bluish-black hair, pale lavender eyes that had no pupils, and a thin scar across her left cheek. Her clothes consisted of a thick baggy gray coat, a pair of dark blue pants that went 3/4 of the way down her legs, and an identical headband around her neck. The short blonde only noticed her arrival after he'd fired again, and was reaching for another arrow. "Oh. Hey Hinata-chan, you're early," he said exuberantly, slipping his arm through his bow so the string rested against his chest and the body against his back before pulling the girl into a one-armed hug. About a month ago, Naruto had been training in this same area when he had heard a branch breaking behind him and shot at it on reflex. It was fortunate that his aim had been off on that day, as it was Hinata who had made the noise while stocky observing her crush. His shot wasn't a complete miss, however, and had instead ended up slicing her cheek pretty badly. Horrified with what he'd done, the blonde redhead had apologized profusely to the poor girl, only to freak out even more when she suddenly fainted when he got close. Not knowing what else to do, and Artemis not having any better ideas, Naruto held Hinata in a bridal carry and took her to Shizen. There were a few complications along the way. Turns out carrying an unconscious and bleeding heiress while hauling ass towards the hospital can look pretty bad out of context, but he eventually got there. Sadly, while Shizen was easily able to treat the injury because of the delay, wasn't able to prevent it from scarring, thus making Naruto feel even worse. To make it up to the brunette, he told her he'd do whatever she wanted for a whole month. To which she promptly passed out again, only this time from a massive nosebleed. After she'd calmed down a bit, Hinata accepted Naruto's offer, but so far had only made 2 requests. The first was that he had to take her out to her favorite bakery where they shared a plate of fresh cinnamon buns, and the second was that they would have lunch together every other day. Hello Naruto-kun, Hinata stuttered meekly as her face turning a bright crimson and steam shot from her ears. Thankfully, after having spent almost an entire month hanging out with her crush on a regular basis, the shy girl was able to stop herself from passing out. I figured TT that since WWE both G graduated Y yesterday, WWE could GG go see celebrate A after an E early lunch. That sounds like an awesome idea. What do you have in mind? Naruto asked cheerfully as he pulled away from the flustered girl and sat down against a nearby tree. WWL. IW was T thinking T that we CC could maybe we could GG go to T the MMM movies for a date. Hinata finished mentally as she struggled to stay awake by focusing on preparing the food she brought with her in the bag, thus missing when Naruto winced slightly at her suggestion. Yeah, about that. I'm kinda not allowed in any of the movie theaters. He mumbled out with a sigh, his good mood diminished slightly as he accepted a cup of sweet tea and some rice balls that she offered him. Really? Hinata asked in surprise, getting a slow nod in response. Why? I'm honestly not sure, Naruto said with a shrug. Every time I've tried to go to one, the employees kick me out while saying I would cause or was causing trouble. Last time it had been how he had supposedly making too much noise during a movie, which actually would have been believable if it wasn't for the fact he hadn't even purchased a ticket yet. Well I am SS sure it will be okay if I'm WW with you, Hinata said optimistically. She was the heiress of one of the most prodigious clans of the entire village, so it was highly unlikely they would turn her down. Alright then, if you insist, Naruto said, feeling a little uneasy at basically using Hinata's status to get something but would go with it since it was her idea. Though that didn't stop him from pulling the girl into another one-armed hug, causing her to squeak adorably. You are such a sweet girl, Hinata. I'm amazed you're still single. Anyone would be really lucky to have you as a girlfriend. He told her while taking a sip of his tea, completely missing as Hinata's face invented a new shade of red. Girlfriend? Is he asking me out? Hinata mentally shouted as her mind only registered the have you as a girlfriend part. Her thoughts were flooded with imaginative scenarios of her and the boy hugging her on various dates, with each one becoming more and more romantic. It quickly became too much for the poor girl and she promptly passed out with steam flooding from her head. Feeling her suddenly go limp against him, Naruto looked down at Hinata with a tilted head. She should really go see a doctor about her fainting spells. He thought with a sigh, having gotten used to the brunette's habit of falling unconscious at random times. Meanwhile, inside his soul Artemis was face-palming at the utter obliviousness of her vessel. He can never be allowed to meet Aphrodite ever. A goddess of love meeting a boy almost completely ignorant of love. Yeah, her fellow Olympian would stop at absolutely nothing to ensure he was properly educated. Of course, she'd have to do it without her fancy tricks, as those only worked on someone who was properly aware of romantic love, a flaw Aphrodite put into her own magic so that she wouldn't accidentally affect young children. Hey, even she had standards and taboos she wouldn't cross. Anyway, back in the real world Naruto carefully stood up, making sure not to jostle Hinata and gently setting her against the tree. Once he was free, he stretched a little bit before walking over to a very battered-up log that had been stuck into the ground and carved into the rough likeness of a person. So how are the sets going to be today? He asked while reaching to the empty holsters at his hips just as they were enveloped in a brief flash of silver light. When it cleared, he had his hands clasped around a pair of ivory handles as he drew two long, slightly curved, hooked silver blades. These were the dancing lunar blades, Artemis's backup knives that she'd reluctantly allowed Naruto to use on the condition that he did exactly as she instructed while teaching him to use them. 3 sets of 200 rising diagonal slashes, then we'll go over vital and joint strikes. When they had first started training, Artemis had tried to teach him the same way as her hunters. This didn't last very long though Naruto lacked the natural flexibility and nimbleness that she was used to working with and ended up throwing his back out. So, she was stuck teaching him basic knife skills, archery training, and muscle memory with a few more advanced tricks she'd managed to rework. By the time Hinata woke from her nap, Naruto had finished his workout and after agreeing on a meet-up point, the Autumn Leaf Theater, the duo split up to get ready. Naruto headed to his place to take a bath and change, while Hinata rushed off to get advice from the only person she could think of. 20 minutes later, Yamanaka Flower Shop. You're going out on a date? One Ino Yamanaka, supposed date exert and gossip queen of Konoha, squealed as she rushed out from behind the counter she was manning and got right in a blushing Hinata's face. With who? When is it? What are you going to wear? She demanded, grabbing the shy girl by the shoulders and shaking her like a ragdoll. 2 AFLLSKFGLLFWRJ. Unfortunately, Hinata's natural stuttering combined with the shaking meant that every word she tried to say came out as a garbled mess. She'd only managed to get out that she was going to the movies with someone when Ino went apeshit on her. This was the sight Ino's mother, a brown-haired, brown-eyed woman wearing a forest green dress, was greeted with when she walked in from the back with a gardenia bush in her arms. Giggling at her daughter's antics, Mrs. Yamanaka set the plant down in its proper place before walking over and prying the blonde off. Ino dear, please refrain from violently shaking our customers, she said in a sickly sweet tone, making Ino shiver and violently nod while in her mother's grip as she was set back down behind the register. Now could you explain to me what exactly is going on here and who this is? Oh, this is Hinata, she's from my class and she's going on a date today, Ino said with another squeal. Hinata meanwhile became even more flustered when Mrs. Yamanaka shifted her gaze over to her. And let me guess, you figured with how much my daughter talks about romance she would have some good advice to help out. When the shy Hyuga slowly nodded her head, the woman smiled cheerily while grasping the girl's shoulder. Well, since Ino is busy with her shift, I'll just have to fill in for her, but let's talk about this at my home where there aren't any eavesdropping blabbermouths, Mrs. Yamanaka said while sending a pointed look towards the innocently whistling blonde behind the counter as she led Hinata out of the shop. I really hope this is worth it, Hinata thought worriedly. I wonder what Naruto is doing right now. As soon as she and Mrs. Yamanaka were out of sight, Ino immediately rushed to the door and flipped the sign from open to closed before rushing out the door. Must find out which theaters are open today. There is no way I am missing gossip as juicy as this. Meanwhile, Naruto's apartment. I don't get why I have to dress differently, Ardine. We're just going to watch a movie together, Naruto grumbled, shaking the water out of his hair before he put on a plain black t-shirt. I never understood the reasoning either, but it is apparently the proper thing to do, Artemis said back, having never had to deal with or worry about the romantic does and don't herself for very obvious reasons. So, her advice was limited to the few snippets she could remember from Aphrodite and her brother Apollo constantly talking about, something she would deny afterward till the day she faded. Never in a million years did I think I'd actually be helping a male get ready for a date, especially one who still hadn't realized he was going on one, Artemis thought with a deadpan. Sure, she could have told him herself, but found it highly unlikely he would even believe her, and she was maybe kinda hoping to recruit the heiress as one of her hunters once she got loose from her imprisonment. With her Byakugans, the Hyuga family Kekkai Genkai, bloodline limit, 360 vision, ability to see through solid objects, and long-range sight, Hinata had the potential to be one of the best archers Artemis had ever seen. But the moon goddess wasn't low enough to actively sabotage the two's chance together. So she settled for just keeping quiet and letting things play out. Besides, she was confident that Naruto's ignorance would eventually cause Hinata to give up sooner or later. Whatever, at least it isn't some stuffy old formal kimono, Naruto said while slipping on a pair of slightly baggy orange pants with dark blue highlights. Agreed. One of the times Artemis had synced, aka willingly possessed, with Naruto was during a large festival a few months back. Shizen had been with them and had insisted that Naruto wear an appropriate attire for it. She had been tired of Naruto complaining about it and had offered to switch places just to shut him up. Not even 5 minutes later, Artemis relinquished control and retreated to her more comfortable bindings, not able to stand the itching, restrictive, and stuffy outfit a second longer. After strapping on his sandals and taking a quick glance at the clock, Naruto saw he had about half an hour before he needed to meet up with Hinata. Hey Ardine, any ideas what to do for the next 30 minutes? Perhaps you should get a gift for Hinata, Artemis suggested after a brief pause, not knowing what else to say. You are going out to celebrate graduation after all. Naruto considered this for a moment before nodding in agreement. Yeah, I could get her some cinnamon buns from her favorite bakery. Thanks Artemis Nay, he said cheerily while leaving his apartment. Don't mention it. Seriously, don't, ever, the goddess said dully, getting a laugh from the blonde as he jogged through the streets of Konoha at a casual pace. Relax, your secret is safe with M-Oof. Gah! Naruto was cut off mid-thought when someone crashed into his side as he was at a cross-section. Caught off guard, he was knocked clean off his feet and set tumbling several yards across the ground before skidding to a stop on his back. Once the shock of impact wore off and his brain caught up with what just happened, Naruto found blinking in surprise as he stared directly into the vibrant greenish-blue eyes of Ino as she straddled his lap. Talk about deja vu, Artemis deadpanned. How the hell does he get into these kinds of situations? Hi Ino? Naruto said nervously as he made sure to keep his arms firmly at his sides. Oh, hey Naruto. Ino said in a dismissive tone as she quickly got back on her feet. Sorry, can't deal with your dumbness now, have to find out where Hinata's date is going to be. Naruto felt his temper flare at how casually she'd insulted him, but was immediately broken from his anger when he heard her mumble that last bit while walking away. Wait, what do you mean Hinata's date? How could she be going on a date when me and her are going to the movies in half an hour? He asked as he stood up and dusted himself off, causing Ino to freeze mid-step. What did you just say? She asked back as her head slowly turned to face him with a rusty creaking noise. Naruto felt a sudden nervousness wash over him as Ino's gaze bore into him, like heck she was trying to read his thoughts just by staring at him hard enough. Me and Hinata are going to the movies so HUI. He yelled indignantly as his fellow blonde grabbed him by the collar and started dragging him off. Let me go! No way! This is the juiciest news I've heard in ages, and this time I am not gonna miss out on it, Ino said as she pulled him into the closest alley and pushed him against a wall. Now tell me everything. Hinata and Naruto exited the Autumn Leaf Theater, a tall building with a variety of red, orange, and yellow colors fitting the season of fall, laughing happily as they discussed the movie they watched. Ernest Goes to Ninja Academy and finished off their bucket of popcorn. Like Hinata had expected, despite their intense dislike for her blonde crush, the majority of the staff for the theater immediately backed off from their attempts to kick him out when she explained that he was with her. The only one who didn't seem to get the message was the ticket checker at the entrance door, but he was promptly fired by the manager for doing something as stupid as trying to kick out the heiress of the prodigious Hyuga clan of all people. Speaking of Hinata, she was thankful for Mrs. Yamanaka's advice on what to do on the date, even if it could be summed up as being herself with a few little extra tidbits here and there. At the same time though, she was extremely nervous inside as Naruto had told her about his run-in with Ino. If there was any moment she hated the blonde redhead's extreme denseness the most, it would have been right then and there, as it turned out he had told the gossip queen of Konoha all about their time together. Flashback. You two have been going out for a month? Ino exclaimed in surprise, finally releasing her grip from Naruto's shirt after she managed to coerce the whole story out of him. For the last time, we aren't dating. I'm just making up for accidentally hurting Hinata while I was training, Naruto said again, only for his words to be completely ignored as Ino was now in full-blown gossip mode. Oh. This explains why Hinata's been acting so oddly recently. I thought she'd just been becoming more confident, or maybe seeing a therapist, but this… She ranted, running her hands through her hair as she paced back and forth. I never expected Miss Can't Speak Louder Than a Mouse of all people to manage to get together with someone before myself, and with you of all people, she mumbled, looking Naruto over dubiously. Hey! What's wrong with dating me? Naruto asked indignantly, getting in his fellow blonde's face as his irritation towards her earlier insults flaring back up. This actually seemed to knock Ino back to reality finally as she looked at Naruto with a blank expression while rolling her eyes. You're super annoying, always pulling stupid pranks and goofing off, and the dead last of our class. Should I go on? She asked rhetorically, before blinking in surprise when instead of responding verbally Naruto started digging around in his pockets. Finding what he was looking for after a few moments, Naruto pulled out a folded-up piece of paper and promptly shoved it into Ino's hands before pushing her out of the way and marching off angrily. Confused at what that was all about, Ino shrugged it off and looked down at the parchment now in her grasp. After a brief mental debate, her curiosity won out, and she unfolded said paper. As soon as her gaze made contact with the content written upon the page though, the gossiper's jaw fell straight to the ground, the rest of her not far behind as she fainted. End flashback. While also upset at Ino for insulting her crush so blatantly, when Naruto had told Hinata what was on the paper he'd given her she had felt much better and had even laughed a little. You see, after announcing the day everyone would come back to be put into teams, Iruka had passed out report cards detailing how well someone had done on the test and what rank they got in class. Ino had gotten ranked 8th place overall. This was something she'd been bragging about as the only girls who'd gotten higher than her were Hinata herself, who beat her in the physical aspect, and Sakura, who beat her in the theoretical aspect. What Ino hadn't known until now, however, was that Naruto, the person she had insulted for being stupid and dead last, had gotten 7th place in the final rankings. Oh, she could imagine that drama queen's reaction already. This has been an awesome night, I'm glad you talked me into this, Naruto said while giving Hinata a one-armed hug. We should do this again sometime. While glowing red from a blush, both from the hug and the blonde's thoughtless words, Hinata managed to keep herself calm with a few discreet deep breaths, another tip from Mrs. Yamanaka. How about after we get assigned to T teams? she suggested, mental grumbling when Naruto broke the hug until he turned to her with his trademark foxy smile. That sounds great, we could even invite some of our friends while we're at it then, he said happily, missing the slight disappointment on Hinata's face since his eyes were closed. She was about to respond when Naruto suddenly stopped with a shiver before looking up to the sky. Following his gaze curiously, she blinked in surprise when she saw the moon just starting to peek out over the horizon. It's getting pretty late, we should be heading home soon, Naruto stated, trying to ignore the sudden rush of energy he'd felt the instant the moon's soft rays touched his skin. It happened every night, and was the main reason he had such difficulty sleeping, with it being the strongest during the full moon and weakest on a new moon. Hinata nodded in agreement, knowing how her father would get if she stayed out too late. While not the most vocal about it, Hayashi Hyuga did care deeply about her, and would no doubt be very concerned over her unexplained absence. So, with a good amount of reluctance, she meekly bid Naruto goodnight and hurried off to the Hyuga compound before such an event could happen. Meanwhile, Naruto, after a brief mental conversation with Artemis, decided to go back to his training ground and burn off the extra steam he got before calling it a night. Besides, even though he graduated didn't mean he could slack off, especially since he still wanted to be Hokage one day. 5 days later, Academy. The entire classroom buzzed with chatter as the newly minted genin talked excitedly in their seats. Naruto was sitting near the window with Sasuke on one side using him as a fangirl barrier and Hinata on the other. Kiba, Choji, and Shikamaru sat in front of them with the later dead asleep already. Behind them was Shino and 2 random boys, and to the side of them was Sakura, Ino and a horde of arguing fangirls. Most were discussing about who they thought or wanted to be teamed up with, the exceptions being Naruto, who was focused on calming down Artemis as she raged about how the fangirls were making women look pathetic, and said fangirls themselves. They were more focused on arguing over a certain duck-but-haired brooding Uchiha, with Sakura easily being the most vocal. Or at least she was until the Pinkette noticed a complete lack of reaction from her rival Ino, who was just sitting in her spot while staring at the report card Naruto had given her with a look of denial. Naturally curious on what could possibly distract the platinum blonde from their precious Sasuke-kun, Sakura peered over her shoulder and started reading for herself. Uzumaki Naruto. Written exam, 91%. Taijutsu exam, 89%. Kunai throwing, 9 out of 10. Shuriken throwing, 8 out of 10. Ninjutsu exam, 2/3. Final results, 82%. Class ranking 7th. Ino, what are you doing with Naruto Baka's exam results? Sakura asked in confusion before a certain fact popped in her head. Wait a second, didn't you get ranked 8th? That would mean she trailed off as the answer dawned on her, swiftly followed by an outburst of laughter as she fell into her seat while holding her sides. Wahahoho! You got a lower grade than Naruto of all people, she said between laughs, drawing the other girl's attention. Faster than you could blink, Sakura's laughter turned into yelps of pain as she was knocked out of her seat and trampled by the horde of females that crowded around Ino and gaped at the sheet in her hands, then at Naruto, as he rubbed his head in irritation. Naruto sighed in relief as he finally managed to get Artemis to relax with the promise of letting her have full control Saturday night for a hunting trip and a long soak at the hot springs. Before he could relax, however, he felt a sudden chill run down his spine as a shadow fell over him. Looking up, he blinked in surprise when he found himself surrounded by the girls of his class, each one glowering down at him while cracking their knuckles threateningly. Can I help you with something? Naruto asked slightly nervously, discreetly doing the hand signs for the kawarimi under the desk just in case. Thankfully, before the angry fangirls could try anything, Irika entered the room. All right everyone, take your seats and quiet down, the man said as he walked over to his desk, only for his to start twitching as he was completely ignored. I said sit down and shut up, he yelled, making everyone jump before scrambling to their seats. Once they were all properly seated, Irika quickly double-checked that everyone was present before pulling out the scroll with the teams listed on them. Now, before I start with team assignments and before any of you ask, Mizuki will not be joining us due to medical issues, Irika stated, getting a few curious looks, but most didn't really care as not many really liked the white-haired teacher. Of course, even if he did show up, no one would recognize him after what happened to him last week after the ninja exams. He'd apparently tried to break into the Hokage vault and steal the scroll of seals right during the night, only to get caught red-handed by Tsunade when she showed up to drop off her bi-weekly medical reports from the hospital. The end results were Konoha Hospital. In the intensive care wing, what could only be described as a mummy lied on one of the beds with an air mask and heart monitor attached to it showing it was still alive. This was especially clear when a certain busted blonde walked in and the heart monitor started beeping rapidly. It then practically overloaded when Tsunade was joined by a purple-haired, brown-eyed woman wearing a large open tan trench coat showing her scantily clad form with a smirk and a really big needle in her hands full of an unknown clear fluid. "Now Mizuki, you're going to tell us everything we need to know," the unknown woman said with a sadistic grin as she pointed the needle at him. "And don't worry, this will only hurt a lot." Academy? Not pretty, to say the least. "Anyway, to the reason all of you are here," Iruka said as he unrolled the scroll in his hands and everyone began paying rapt attention. Team 1 will is K fast-forwarding sound effect. Team 7 is Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Shikamaru Nara. Your team leader is Kakashi Hatake, Iruka said, rolling his eyes at the cheer, muffled groan, and snore he got in response before continuing. Team 8 is Kiba Inuzuka, Hinata Hyuga, and Shino Aburame with Kurenai Yuhi as your leader. Kiba whooped happily as his puppy Akamaru woofed. Shino had no visible reaction, and Hinata just looked glum at the fact she wouldn't be on the same team as Naruto. Team 9 is still in circulation. Finally, Team 10 will be Choji Akimichi, Ino Yamanaka, and Naruto Uzumaki. Your team leader is Asuma Sarutobi. Naruto, while a little saddened that he wasn't on the same team as either Sakura or Hinata, still smiled cheerfully as he high-fived Choji and accepted the small bag of chips the big-boned boy offered him. Ino finally seemed to snap out of her daze, and opened her mouth to start bitching, but a sharp look from Iruka shut her right up. "Sensei, why do I have to be paired up with this lazy idiot? He'll just drag me and Sasuke down with his slothfulness." The same could not be said for Sakura, however. "For a very simple reason, Sakura," Iruka said in his patented lecture voice, "the teams are specifically set up to be as balanced as possible. For example, we traditionally have the two highest scoring students," he gestures to the Pinkette and Sasuke, "and the lowest scoring student," Iruka points to Shikamaru who's still snoring away. "Put on the same team to balance to both encourage the failing student to do better and keep the better students from getting too high in ego." A smart idea. Many strong or intelligent men and women have gotten themselves and others killed due to a swelled head, Artemis said to Naruto solemnly, having seen such cases many times in her long lifespan. One example was a daughter of Athena she had only just recruited in the 1800s who'd gotten herself and 3 other hunters eaten by a cyclops after arrogantly believing she could defeat the monster on her own with her inherited high intelligence. Naruto nodded at that, but didn't say anything as he knew he tended to get cocky and overconfident during a fight himself. He was a little better than he used to be though, thanks to Artemis's words of wisdom and Tsunade literally beating some humility into him every once in a while. With that all cleared up, please wait here until your new Kyoshi, teachers, arrive here shortly for your first team meetings, Iruka told them while rolling up the team list scroll and heading for the door. Just before he left though, the nose-scarred man turned back to the class and bowed. "It has been my honor teaching you, and I wish you all the best of luck." With his piece said, Iruka exited the classroom, leaving behind a complete silence that held the room for several moments before the door opened again and 2 people stepped inside. The first was a man with black hair and beard, tan skin, and a cigarette in his mouth, while the other was a woman who was also black-haired, with pale skin and striking red eyes. "Teammate with me," the woman said with a wave of her arm, only having to wait a few seconds before Hinata, Shino, and a visibly drooling Kiba stood in front of her before heading right back out the door again with her team in tow. The man on the other hand seemed content to just stand there and finish his cigarette. Once he was down to the butt, he spat it out and smothered it with his foot before smiling lightly. "I'm here for Team 10, please follow me." Inside a small barbecue restaurant, the 3 members of the newly formed Team 10 sat on one side of a table, while their just as newly assigned sensei sat down on the other, and quickly ordered them all something to eat. He then proceeded to light up the personal grill built into the middle of the table and set it to the proper temperature. "Well then, while we're waiting for the food to arrive, let's get a little more acquainted, shall we?" The man, Asuma if Iruka was to be believed, said as he relaxed into his seat and lit up a cigarette. "Just share your name, skills, and maybe a few facts about yourself if you'd like. I'll start. The name's Asuma Sarutobi. I'll be your teacher for the indeterminate time it takes you all to either get promoted, an apprenticeship, quit, or die." The way he said that last bit so bluntly, and casually making the 3 of them cringe slightly, he certainly wasn't sugarcoating anything. "I am a close combat specialist preferring knives, with a few wind and fire jutsu under my belt. I'm a pretty chill guy, just don't mess with my smokes or else," Asuma said, twirling a customized trench knife lazily before pointing it at Naruto. "You next." While a little unnerved, the blonde redhead quickly shook it off and introduced himself. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki, future Hokage Databayo. I prefer using knives as well, but also know a bit of archery thanks to Ardi-nichan," he said cheerfully, earning two confused looks from Ino and Choji. "Ardi-nichan?" The two unknowingly thought at the same time, while Ino struggled to restrain her inner gossip queen from popping out and force her fellow blonde into telling her what she wanted. Naruto had already told her about his bow training, having had to mention it when he was coerced into talking about his relationship with Hinata, but he had not mentioned who was teaching him, so she had assumed he was self-taught. Actually, she had thought he had been bullshitting her in an attempt to look cool. Ino was brought out of her thoughts when a waitress came by and set down a large tray of different uncooked meats, vegetables, sauces, chopsticks, and plates. Recognizing the woman as the mother of one of her friends in the academy, the blonde was about to greet her, but stopped when she noticed the stink-eye the waitress was giving Naruto. This was odd for Ino since, being the gossiper that she was, as far as she knew Naruto hadn't done anything to the woman to deserve such hostility. Her curiosity piqued, she filed the thought away for later as she split a pair of chopsticks and started placing lots of the meats and veggies on the grill. "Better make sure to eat plenty or Mom will tan my rear again," she thought with a grimace. Mrs. Yamanaka had brought the hammer down on her daughter last month after the 5th time she tried extreme dieting. Ino couldn't sit properly for almost 3 days from the spanking she got, and for added measure, she was forced to read several books describing the many downsides of her kind of dieting in very vivid detail. While many were horrible in their own right, the worst one in her opinion was the very high possibility of becoming barren, and she certainly couldn't get Sasuke to fall for her if she couldn't even have children. She had even tried to warn Sakura about it, but sadly the pinkette had simply accused her of trying to trick her. Not only continued to diet, but had started doing even more extreme ones, and Ino was beginning to see exactly what her mother had been warning her about. Her best friend turned rival skin had been slowly losing pigment, while becoming unnaturally tighter and withdrawn around her cheeks and joints. At the same time, Sakura had been increasingly lethargic as of late, with their usual arguments over Sasuke ending sooner and sooner due to her needing to sit down and rest. Before these dark thoughts could get any farther though, Ino was once again forced back to reality, this time by someone loudly clearing their throat. Looking towards the source, she found herself under Asuma, Naruto, and Choji's expectant stares. Turned out while she was distracted, Choji had gone through his introduction and now they were waiting for her. "Oh. Hi, I'm Ino Yamanaka. I know some of my clan's techniques, and a variety of poisonous and medicinal plants. And as you can see, the most beautiful kunoichi of the year," Ino said, adding a mock flirtatious wink at the end that Asuma rolled his eyes good-naturedly at. "Well then, now that that is out of the way, we can move on to the main deal, your final exam, which starts as soon as you're done eating." The moment these words left Asuma's mouth, 3 things happened at once. Choji actually stopped eating, Naruto choked on a piece of pork, and Ino dropped her chopsticks. "What final exam?" Naruto and Ino demanded at the same time, both standing up and getting in the man's face only to quickly be repulsed with an unnaturally fragrant puff of cigarette smoke. "Mother of Zeus! What in Tartarus are those things made of?" Artemis gagged as she smelt the pungent smell through Naruto. "No idea, but I am never smoking, ever," Naruto replied, waving his hand desperately to hasten the noxious fumes' dispersal. Meanwhile, a tiny smirk appeared on Asuma's lips as he watched the two blondes struggle with a watered-down version of his katan, Kitsunsha no Jigaku, fire release, smoker's hell. "It's rather easy to explain, really. After a group of newly minted genins such as yourselves are put into a squad and assigned a team leader, said team leader will put said squad through a personal test. This is to see if you all are actually worthy of being shinobi and if the time and effort put into training you further would be a waste. If failed, you all will be immediately sent back to the academy for continued training or dropped from the program entirely." Blunt, direct, and straight to the point. "I like that," the moon goddess commented with a nod of approval towards the explanation. She always hated when one danced around the subject at hand using half-truths and or overly complicated wording, making it nearly impossible to figure out what they truly said in the end. Especially when it involved dealing either her brother, Hermes, or Aphrodite, as they were experts in the art of wordplay. "Your test is a relatively simple one and, as I've already said, starts as soon as you're done eating. All you have to do is find and capture me in training ground 10 before 5 o'clock. Poof! Before any of the kids could respond to his declaration, the bearded smoker was engulfed in a puff of more foul smoke that left them all, Artemis included, still hacking and coughing. Once it cleared up, Asuma was naturally nowhere to be seen, only a small stack of bills to pay for the meal. Glancing at the clock and seeing that it was already 2:15, the trio quickly scarfed down their food and hurried out of the restaurant. "We need to hurry. The train grounds are on the other side of Konoha," Ino yelled as she ran down the street, missing the blank looks she was getting from Naruto and Choji. "She's not seriously going by road, is she?" Naruto asked Choji blankly, receiving a slow nod of confirmation in response. "I'll get her, meet you there," the blonde redhead said, getting another nod before they separated, with Naruto dashing after Ino while Choji took to the rooftops. Before Ino even realized what happened, she found herself quite literally swept off her feet and soaring through the air as Naruto grabbed her and leapt up on top of the nearest building. Reacting instinctually, she squirmed wildly while assaulting the sparkle-eyed boy with a flurry of smacks and jabs. "What the hell, Naruto baka? What are you doing? Put me down!" She quickly got her wish as an annoyed-looking Naruto promptly dropped her on her ass, making her yelp from both surprise and pain. "It'll be faster to go by rooftop, we can cut right across to the training grounds," he told her bluntly as she was recovering, then dashing off. Standing up slowly, Ino winced as she rubbed her lightly bruised posterior while glaring at the direction Naruto had gone. "Hey! That is not how you treat a lady! Get back here, you baka, and apologize!" she screamed as she started chasing after him. 15 minutes later. Naruto landed in Training Ground 10, a lightly forested area with several large creeks and stone outcroppings, and casually walked over to Choji, who was happily eating a bag of chips. Ino showed up a few seconds later, though her landing wasn't as thump-huff-wheeze graceful. Naruto, Choji, and Artemis' sweat dropped at the sight of the exhausted girl slowly standing up while trying to catch her breath. "She cannot be serious. Please tell me she isn't serious," the moon goddess asked dully. Her newly recruited ex-civilian hunters could normally manage that kind of exercise with only moderate trouble, and this girl looked like she was going to hurl. "Don't be too harsh, Nei-chan," Naruto thought as he fished out a storage scroll out of his kunai pouch and unrolled. With a quick application of chakra and a poof of smoke, his quiver, bow, and knife sheaths appeared in his hands. "She probably just had too much to eat or something." "Your unending optimism never ceases to amaze me," Artemis said in the same bland tone while Naruto hooked everything up. "Seriously, was there anything that could keep this boy down for long?" "I aim to please," Naruto thought with a smile, notching an arrow while turning to Choji and a recovered Ino. "Well, we're here, let's get this test finished," he said, bouncing on the balls of his feet excitedly. His mood quickly dropped though when Ino shoved him to the side and stood over him. "Alright, first things first, I'm in charge. You and Piggy over there better not slow me down. I will not fail this test because you two slackers dragged me down," she said with a huff before marching off in a random direction. Naruto and Choji glanced at each other before shrugging in sync and following the girl's lead, either of them noticing Asuma observing them from above. "Hey, you got any spare snacks, Choji?" Instead of verbally replying, Choji simply pulled another bag of chips out from one of his pockets and handed it to Naruto. "Thanks." 1 hour later. "Hurry up with you, we need to go faster." "No, go that way, we already looked in that direction." "Stop jostling so much. And keep your hands where I can see them or else I'll—" "Can I shoot her? Please?" Naruto asked with a twitching eyebrow as he tried to tune out Ino's complaining as she rode on his shoulders. They had been looking all over the training ground with absolutely no luck, and the gossip queen had eventually started complaining about her feet hurting. Choji carried her for a bit only for her to complain about crumbs getting on her, so now Naruto was stuck doing it. So here they were, tree-hopping all over the place as Ino constantly bitched. "I could make it look like an accident." "No, it's not worth the trouble," Artemis said through gritted teeth while rubbing her forehead in a vain attempt to prevent the headache she could feel forming. "Could you give me a hand then? You are the one who knows how to track after all," Naruto pointed out. "Ugh, could we get somewhere shadier? I'm sweating like CRAEK. Ino shrieked out when her ride suddenly dropped to the ground and bucked her off. "What the hell, Naruto? What are you?" Silence. Ino and Choji froze as they heard Artemis's voice come out from Naruto's mouth as they saw his eye colors suddenly switch. "You are no longer leading, you have done nothing but complain while guiding us in circles." Ino was about to complain some more before shivering as she literally felt the irritation behind those words, and suddenly had an odd craving for carrots. "Naruto, what's up with your voice?" Choji asked nervously. "Call me Artemis, Naruto will explain later, but right now we have a prey to track down. So be silent," Artemis said, her gaze flickering in several different directions while she strained her hearing to the max before settling on a tree several feet to her left. Too easy. Pay attention, this is the plan." Up in the tree line, Asuma's eyes narrowed as he watched the interaction between his possible students. Father wasn't kidding, he truly does become a different person, he thought, watching with slight amazement as Naruto's appearance changed, but his body language shifted from excited and eager to calm, collected, and alert. The third Hokage had warned him on the boy's unique condition, but it was still quite intriguing to see firsthand. Of course, That intrigue didn't prevent him from dodging accordingly as 2 arrows embedded themselves in the branch he had been standing on. Seeing that he'd been made, Asuma dropped to the ground in front of the 3. "Good job, you 3, you finally found me," he said, mentally noting that Naruto was back to normal. "Now you just have to catch me if you can," he taunted while casually catching an arrow flying at him. "Just watch us and Tatsu-sensei, Smokestack-sensei. We'll kick your ass all the way to next week if we have to," Naruto declared while lining up another shot, only instead of having a regular arrowhead, this one had 16 edges. The reason for this was soon revealed as Naruto released the shot. Asuma was about to deflect it using the arrow still in his grasp when the projectile suddenly split apart midair, revealing a net made of ninja wire that quickly snared him. Before Naruto could enjoy his success though, Asuma disappeared in a puff of smoke, leaving behind a log in his place. "Damn, Hikawar-gh." Naruto was cut off mid-sentence by a heavy kick to his back that sent him flying face first into a tree. "Awwa." "Always be aware of your surroundings," Asuma said from where Naruto used to stand, rapidly striking out with 2 punches that sent his other 2 hopeful students tumbling away. "Failing to do so can and will lead to your demise." Peeling his face out of the tree, Naruto spat out a mouthful of bark with a grimace while shouldering his bow, summoning his knives, and charging straight at the smoking man with a rising slash. He never got close though, as Asuma easily blocked the strike, and the several follow-ups, with his trench knives. Not bad, though the style clearly isn't suited for him, Asuma thought, noting the look of discomfort in Naruto's face as he did a semi-complex feint that made it look like he was attacking the chest when he was really aiming for the legs. He was slightly surprised though when Naruto suddenly aborted his assault entirely with a wide grin, but was pretty sure he knew why when he felt the ground start rumbling underneath his feet. "Human boulder!" Choji yelled as his now giant ball-like form barreled through the area like an angry rhino. While the smoker was busy dodging the big-boned boy, Naruto redrew his bow and pulled out 2 different arrows. The first was similar to his net arrow, only with 20 slightly curved edges instead of 16 straight, while the second had a ridged metal shaft and a black round arrowhead. Nothing them both at the same time, Naruto leapt back several feet before lining up his shot while channeling chakra into both arrows, giving them a light blue sheen. "Wait for the signal, wait for it there," Naruto thought as he spotted Ino peeking out from behind a tree, using a kunai to reflect the light in a specific pattern. As soon as he saw this, Naruto fired, sending the first arrow sailing high into the sky until it vanished among the clouds. The second one, on the other hand, flew straight at Asuma just as he hopped out of the way of another charge from Choji. In a show of near inhuman flexibility though, Asuma bent backwards nearly 90 degrees, allowing the arrow to pass over him harmlessly, or so he thought. When he leaned back up, he felt something lightly bite into his cheek and instinctually grabbed it. "Wire?" he wondered before turning his head when he heard an odd noise behind him. What he was greeted with was the sight of the arrow bouncing off of trees, rocks, and other such debris all around him while leaving behind a trail of ninja wire that got caught on the handles of several kunais that had been strategically placed throughout the area. In less than 30 seconds, a veritable web of the thin metal cord completely surrounded him as Naruto caught the bouncing projectile and pulled the whole thing taut. Seconds later, the arrow he shot into the sky came back into view, having split into 20 separate shots connected by another net as they spun rapidly. Falling perfectly around Asuma, the net snagged onto the cords surrounding him, pulling them even more closely together and trapping him further. "Kyujutsu, Tsuki no Saiza-keiji, Bao Art, Lunar Constellation Cage," Naruto said with a grin while mentally thanking Artemis for helping him come up with this trick. "Now Ino!" Choji yelled, having shrunk back down to regular size. "Shintenshin no Jutsu!" the blonde girl cried, forming a square with her hands and pointing it towards Asuma, then suddenly going limp and collapsing. At the same time, Asuma suddenly became entirely still for several moments before a mischievous grin crossed his lips. "I got him!" 5 minutes later. Asuma didn't make a sound as he felt Ino release her possession on him, not even bothering trying to move as he felt the ninja wire binding him from the neck down while Naruto, Ino, and Choji stood over him with identical triumphant smiles. Looks like you 3 got me, guess that means you passed the test," he said with a grin, making the 3 cheer happily before jumping back in surprise as the man's bindings suddenly fell loose and he stood up without issue. "Congratulations Team 10, meet me here tomorrow at 8 o'clock for training." Naruto expected a lot of things when he finally became a fully fledged ninja. He expected long adventure-filled missions filled with fighting, saving lives, and having awesome adventures. He anticipated long hard training sessions where he struggled to learn new, badass techniques to make him a better ninja. He did not expect to be crouching in some civilian woman's garden pulling out weeds with his 2 teammates while said woman stood over their shoulders and telling him off for every little mistake. "I said get all of the weeds, that includes the roots." Be careful with the petunias, girl. I spent months cultivating them to perfection. I freaking hate D-rank missions. Naruto thought with a twitching eyebrow as he stuffed a handful of dandelions into a compost bin. He and his team had been stuck doing these things for almost 3 weeks now, and they were starting to get on his last nerve. On that we agree, these things are nothing but a complete waste of time and my patience. Artemis said as she massaged her forehead. These missions were nothing more than glorified chores, and a lot of the time the civilian hiring them whined and bitched about almost everything. The worst one in her opinion was catching that stupid cat Tora. She had felt every single scratch that Naruto had gotten, and not even her natural affinity towards animals had been able to calm that stupid feline down. At least the training makes up for it somewhat, Naruto thought. Throughout the 3 weeks Asuma had been drilling the 3 of them through various team and individual exercises while also teaching them to improve their chakra control with the tree climbing technique. This involved walking up a tree or vertical surface by channeling chakra to the bottom of your feet. Too little and you wouldn't stick, while too much would destroy the tree under our feet. And don't forget, we finally found a way for you to have your own body thanks to Ino and Asuma-sensei. I'll admit that is a boon, there's hope for that girl yet. Shortly after the test, Naruto was forced to explain his split personality to Choji and Ino thanks to Artemis's little appearance. While the chubby boy had trouble understanding, Ino was easily able to grasp the concept thanks to her having to study the human mind while learning her clan's techniques. After a long and very personal series of questions that Naruto was forced to answer in order to get his fellow blonde to agree not to tell anyone about it, Ino had jokingly commented on getting Artemis her own body so she wouldn't have to deal with being stuck in Naruto's head. Instead of being insulted though, Naruto had grown curious about the idea and had asked Asuma if such a thing was possible. He in turn had said that here might be one, but he had to run it past the Hokage first. 2 days later, Naruto was the proud new user of the Kagebunshin no Jutsu, a more complex and chakra-intensive version of the Bunshin no Jutsu that made solid, fully functional copies of the user. By making a single one of these, Naruto could allow Artemis to possess it and still remain in complete control of his own body. When she did this, Naruto would lose most of the silver flecks in his eyes and clone would automatically change to Artemis's true appearance. The only downsides were that the clones tended to disperse after taking only a single hit, so Artemis had to be extra careful, and for some reason whenever Artemis did this, a thin golden chain would burst from the back of Naruto's neck and latch onto hers. Well, there was also the 6-hour shopping spree that Ino had forcefully dragged the both of them into to buy Artemis some new clothes, but the two had agreed never to mention that horrible experience ever again. So many dresses. Shiver still, despite these drawbacks, Naruto had been nonetheless super happy to finally be able to meet his Nachon face to face for the first time and had given Ino a near back-breaking hug in thanks. His face still stung from the slapping she had given him in response, but he didn't mind one bit. Still, hopefully Asuma-sensei will keep his word and we'll finally get to do a C rank after this, Naruto thought while digging his hands back into the soil with a grunt, sending a sidelong glance to said man as he leaned against the fence smoking. As far as males go, he seems trustworthy enough. If not, however, I will show him exactly how I earned the title of Huntress, Artemis said, cracking her knuckles for added emphasis. Naruto shivered slightly at the thought, remembering how effectively the goddess had tracked, killed, and butches an 800-pound bear during her promised hunting trip. He learned 2 things that day: bear steak is awesome when grilled with barbecue sauce, and he never wanted to be hunted by Artemis. That might be taking it a little too far, don't you think? The silence he received was all the answer he needed. Alright boys and girls, that's a wrap for today. Asuma's voice cut in as he rolled up a small scroll with the civilian woman's signature on it, said woman, giving all 3 of them a disgusting glare before marching back into her house. Let's head over to the mission hall, and we'll get that C rank I promised you all. Finally, if I had to listen to that woman whine one more time, I swear I was going to mind jump her and make her do the chicken dance in the market district. Ino grumbled while wiping fertilizer off her hands. Those stupid flowers aren't even petunias there. Caliber koas, you'd think she'd know that with how much effort she put in caring for them. Naruto cut in with equal annoyance as he stood up and dusted himself off. Noticing the long silence around him, he glanced around to see Ino staring at him in surprise. What? Me and Artie Nichin like to garden, remember? The girl had enough decency to look sheepish at that, since he had even gone to her family shop on several occasions to buy certain plants, and had even helped him with his not-so-little rooftop garden herself once. Right, sorry, she mumbled as she dropped her gaze and they headed out. Ino was still shocked on how much she was learning about her enigmatic blonde teammate. Ever since her first few weeks of going to the academy, she had always seen Naruto as a lazy, inattentive, hyperactive, loudmouthed idiot that was always causing trouble, and so had naturally paid very little attention to him other than to use his crush on Sakura as teasing ammo against the Pinkette. Now that she was literally forced to spend time with him, however, she found the true meaning of the phrase "don't judge a book by its cover." Sure, Naruto was still a hyperactive knucklehead that tended to be overly exuberant, but he wasn't as stupid as she had thought. He just had trouble understanding things at first and sometimes needed it dumbed down a bit. He was also quite perceptive when it came to fighting, quickly coming up with on-the-fly and somewhat crazy plans that would somehow work most of the time. There were also the more sensitive things she had learned about him, such as the fact he was an orphan during said visit to his garden. That was something she really should have known already, given she had been in the same class as him for a few years now and she had never once seen any form of parental figure with him, but like previously stated, she had never actually bothered to pay attention to him. It had also explained his lack of social skills and childish mannerisms, since she doubted anyone had actually taken the time to teach him better. Boy, did she feel like a bitch after that, remembering all the times she had mocked him both openly and behind his back for such things. Especially when she figured that Artemis was most likely a result of his desperation towards having some kind of family, even if it was just imaginary. It was made a bit better when she met Shizen though, when the apprentice stopped by to make sure he was taking his meds, some kind of sleep aids. Ino was broken out of her thoughts as the Ninja Academy came into sight. Instead of walking in the main entrance though, the quartet took a left and headed towards a large doorway on the side that had a sign above it that said Mission Hall. Stepping through, they were greeted by the third Hokage as he, Iruka, and a couple of other ninja that they didn't know sorting through various scrolls and documents. Walking up to Iruka, Asuma handed him the scroll from earlier before turning towards Hiruzen with a slightly stiff bow. "Mission completed, sir, and ready for a debrief on that C rank I had requested yesterday." Nodding his head, the elderly Kage took a deep draw from his pipe while pulling out a scroll with the kanji for C rank across it in bold and handed it over. "Your mission is a joint mission with Team 9 to the land of Kanoko. The ruling body there, Princess Momo, has asked for assistance on dealing with her country's overpopulation of turtles." "Seriously, Gigi?" Naruto asked with a deadpan, ignoring the light slap Ino gave him for speaking informally. "You're sending us to go hunt turtles?" "Well, that was the original plan, but someone had other ideas," Hiruzen said with a sigh as he pinched the bridge of his nose. Before Naruto could ask him what he meant, the door behind them suddenly slammed open. Looking back to see what the cause was, Naruto recoiled slightly at the sight of a tall muscular man wearing a skin-tight green jumpsuit with orange leg warmers with a bull haircut and the biggest pair of eyebrows he had ever seen in his life. YOSH. Team 9 reporting for their duty of youthful saving the poor turtles of their most unyouthful fate, Hokage-sama. The man yelled exuberantly while marching into the room, followed by an equally excited mini version of himself, an exasperated girl with her hair done up in two buns, and a stoic Hyuga boy whose twitching eyebrow was the only sign of his annoyance. "Hello Gai-san, glad to see you're so excited to get going. There has been a slight change of plans, however," Hiruzen said, getting the now-named guy to calm down slightly. "Asuma and Team 10 will joining you on your mission as a way to get themselves acquainted to missions outside the village. I assume you don't mind, correct?" "Of course not, Hokage-sama. This just means I have the opportunity to help fan the flames of youth in these young genin alongside my own," Guy yelled, while his mini-me cheered and the bun girl sighed in defeat. "Good to hear. Off you go then, you have 2 hours to get ready before needing to depart," the Hokage said with a dismissive wave of his hand, getting the 8 to leave. Once the door closed behind them, the elderly leader turned to Iruka with a raised eyebrow. "Not going to complain about them not being ready like you did with Team 7? "No sir," he said while continuing to sort through scrolls. "Because unlike Team 7, you're at least sending this team off with a more experienced team as support." "I guess that is fair enough." "With Teams 9 and 10. Alright, you three, since this will be your first mission out of the village, each of you will have a member of Guy's team to help you get ready," Asuma said before grunting as Guy patted him roughly on the back. "An excellent idea, my youthful comrade," Guy yelled boisterously with a laugh. "Lee, you go with the young lady." The mini-me saluted with a cry of yash, before running off while a shivering Ino followed. "Niji, you help the big-boned lad." The Hyuga scoffed with a reluctant nod of his head as he marched off with Choji in tow. "And Tenten, you'll—" "I get it, come on Blondie," the bun girl said with a roll of her eyes while grabbing Naruto's arm and dragging him off. "We're going to my family's shop." Why?" Naruto asked after pulling himself out of her grip with a grunt. "To get you properly equipped. Those empty sheaths aren't exactly going to intimidate anyone you know," Tenten stated while pointing to said sheaths around his waist. "Oh, but I already got that covered," Naruto said while summoning the dancing lunar blades into their holsters with a flash of silver light. At the same time, he pulled out the scroll he kept his bow and quiver and unsealed them for her to see. "See, I Ju!" he exclaimed when the brunette swiped the daggers and began looking them over critically. These are amazing. Tenten muttered in awe, giving the blades a few test swings. Perfectly balanced, no visible flaws, honed to just the right sharpness. And not yours. Naruto cut in with annoyance as he unsummoned the knives with another flash and resealed his bow. Ain't you ever heard of personal property beef, oh hey? The boy yelled as Tenten grabbed him by the shoulders, hoisted him up to eye level, and pulled him uncomfortably close to her face. Where did you get those weapons? Who made them? Tell me, she demanded excitedly. Instead of verbally answering, Naruto frowned deeply with a twitching eyebrow before tilting his head back and harshly ramming his forehead into hers. Gah! Why is every girl I meet so freaking weird, Databeo? Naruto thought to himself as he landed back on his feet, watching the dazed girl carefully as she recovered. I would normally be insulted by that, if I wasn't wondering the exact same thing, Artemis admitted with a sigh. Ow, what is your skull made out of? Tenten asked slightly groggily while rubbing the rapidly growing red spot on her forehead. Shaking her head a few times to clear the ringing still echoing in her head, she looked back at the still annoyed-looking blonde and smiled a little sheepishly. Sorry about that, weapons are my specialty, and sometimes I can get a little overly excited. No kidding, Naruto deadpanned, making the bun-haired girl laugh awkwardly. Whatever, let's just get going, he said before gesturing for her to take the lead again. So does your shop happen to sell arrows? Only the best. I'll be the judge of that. I'll admit, these are some very high-quality arrows, Artemis said as Naruto twirled one of his newly purchased arrows between his fingers as he walked towards the front gate of Konoha. Yeah, they're certainly better than the ones you and me have been making, Naruto thought, sticking the arrow back into his quiver. What can I say, I'm the hunter, Hephaestus was the forger, the moon goddess said with a shrug. Sure, she could make arrows of her own when needed, but they would pale in quality to a true blacksmith's work. I just hope that discount you managed to negotiate was worth it, she said dully, earning herself a mental glare. Don't you me, it was your idea, Naruto thought with a sigh as he looked towards his walking companion. Tenten was completely oblivious to her surroundings as she examined several of Naruto's trick arrows at once with sparkles in her eyes. With Artemis's help, the blonde had managed to convince the bun girl to give him half off in exchange for those arrows, the schematics on how to make them when they got back, and a few archery lessons since a bow was one of the few weapons she wasn't proficient in yet. Really? 'Cause I distinctly remember you asking me for help on buying them. I asked how many we should get since we didn't have much money. You're the one who suggested we try and get a discount. Damn it. Artemis grumbled when she realized she didn't have a counter-argument for that while Naruto smirked victoriously. Before she had a chance to come up with one, the trio finally arrived at their destination, the massive gates that acted as the main entrance to Konoha where the rest of both their teams were standing. Cutting it a bit close, aren't you? We leave in 1 minute, Asuma said, being the first to spot the pair approaching. Sorry, Antatsu-sensei, we got a little sidetracked, Naruto said blandly while glancing at Tenten, who had broken out of her little fangirl moment at last and quickly hid the arrows behind her with an innocent grin. I see, Asuma said after a brief pause as he followed Naruto's gaze before shaking the odd side off. Besides, he'd seen Otter. And did you make sure to grab your meds? Duh, sensei, Naruto said with a roll of his eyes as he fished out a small orange bottle from his pocket for the man to see, either of them seeing Niji's narrowed eyes as he saw this out of the corner of his eye. Good, guy, we're ready to go, Asuma called to his fellow jonin. Yosh! That's great. Now we can show the people of Kanoko our flames of youth, the spandex-wearing man yelled as he and Lee charged through the front gates, crackle literally. Kami, damn it, guy! Asuma groaned as he, Niji, Tenten, and the two guards standing by the gate palmed their faces at the gaping hole the excited duo had left behind before the two teams swiftly following after the excited duo. Be ready for a rough few days, you three. Guy loves to make things into impromptu training sessions. Asuma-san, let us test how well your team is doing stamina-wise. We'll cut down the journey from 4 days to 2 with the power of youth. Just like that, Asuma finished with a deadpan as a strong feeling of dread filled the three genin. Meanwhile, one of the two guards raised his hand up to his ear with a sigh. This is Izumo, we have a code green again. 2 days later. So tired my legs are killing me, Naruto groaned, sweat pouring off of him as he trudged up a hill. Just like Guy had said, he had the two teams sprint the entire way while only stopping a handful of times to rest. It was only made worse as Naruto and Artemis's combined competitive nature made them keep pushing regardless. I know, isn't it so youthful? Lee asked from beside the blonde, looking a bit better for wear but still pretty tired. Behind them Niji, Tenten, and Choji were badly winded themselves, but not nearly as badly since they had paced themselves better. Finally, Ino had straight up passed out about an hour ago and was being carried by a still deadpanning Asuma, while a sheepish guy rubbed the back of his head. I may have gone a little overboard with this youthful exercise, this spandex-wearing man admitted with a chuckle as everyone but Lee gave him a glare that screamed no shit. But on the bright side, we're here already, he said while gesturing to the town that came into view as the group reached the top of the hill. Welcome to Omocha, capital of the land of Kanoko and home of the best mushroom industry in all of the elemental nations. Said town was moderately sized, consisting of hundreds of houses with either red or green roofs with a small castle made of white marble with bright red roofing situated in the middle. The land outside the town was littered with dozens of farms that were filled with hundreds of varieties of mushrooms and a large forest. Guy, you and your team take Ino and get some hotel rooms booked for the night. The rest of us will go and speak with Princess Momo to inform her that we have arrived, the smoker said while handing the passed-out girl over to the exuberant man. You got it, Asuma-san, then we can get on with our most youthful mission of saving those innocent turtles, Guy said with a wide grin, restraining himself from yelling so not to disturb Ino as she slept. With their plan decided, the two teams marched into Omocha at a sedate pace. While they walked, the farmers working in the field stopped to stare at the new arrivals, each of them wearing protective straw hats that were painted red with white spots. Okay, this is getting ridiculous, Artemis said suddenly, making Naruto jump slightly in surprise. Is something wrong, Artie-nichan? He asked in confusion. This entire place reminds me way too much of a game my brother Apollo would make me play with him whenever he dragged me along for family night, Artemis said, her eyes narrowed in mild suspicion. The mushroom theme, the red-spotted hats, the castle, the turtle problem, even the princess's name for Zeus's sake. All that's missing are overly large green pipes and a short plumber wearing a red hat and blue overalls. Okay, Naruto thought as he cautiously put some mental distance between himself and the ranting goddess while noting as Guy and his team broke off to find a hotel once they entered the actual town. Great, Artie's going nuts again. I heard that. Oh Kyuso, bye. Naruto thought hurriedly as he popped his focus back into the real world. You okay there, Squirt? Asuma asked when he saw the spooked expression on the blonde's face. Huh. Oh yeah, Artie-nichan's just wants out soon. Naruto lied nervously, not wanting to make the goddess inside his gut any angrier. I know that tone, wonder what he did to piss her off, Asuma thought while pretending to buy the blonde's excuse. Alright then, you can let her out once we officially get started on the mission. But you'll have to explain her presence to Team 9. You got it, Entatsu-sensei, Naruto said reluctantly, getting an encouraging pat on the shoulder from the man as he brought a cigarette up to his lips. As much as secrecy was a ninja's best friend, the blonde's condition wasn't something that you could just spring on your comrades. It was better for him to get it out now rather than them accidentally stumble on it and come up with the wrong conclusion. Choji was content to remain silent as he happily munched away on a kebab of roasted mushrooms that he'd bought from a stand as they were walking. It only took a few minutes to arrive at the center of Omocha where the castle was and were approaching the front gates when a man in his late 30s, likely a guard based on his armor and weapons, got in their path. Halt, strangers! Who are you and why do you approach the home of the royal family? Easy there. We're shinobi from Kanahigakure, we're here to fulfill a mission request sent by Princess Momo, Asuma said, pulling out the mission scroll and unrolling it for the guard to see the signature on the bottom. Looking at it closely, the guard remained silent for several moments before nodding his head in approval and stepping back to his original position. That's my lady's handwriting, all right. The throne room is straight ahead. Don't cause any trouble. You got it, guard-san, Asuma said with a bow as he and the two genin passed him. As the trio walked down the marble-tiled pathway, Naruto and Artemis couldn't help but admire the gardens they passed along the way. While they weren't stuffed to the brim with exotic and rare plants like one would expect with most royalty, the few that were there were clearly well taken care of alongside the various local and common species. This princess has a good taste. I always hated those overly extravagant messes that royalty called gardens, Artemis said as they reached the main entrance, a large reinforced wooden door with a stained glass window depicting a blonde woman wearing a pink dress with the sun in the background. Even Aphrodite found most of them to be obnoxious and her entire temple was entirely hot pink. That sounds like it would be painful to look at, Naruto thought, his eyes squinting slightly just imagining such a thing. It is, but not nearly as bad as Apollo's. He made his entirely out of gold and has it waxed every 6 hours, Artemis said with a grimace. If even a single tiny ray of light strikes that building, the whole thing lights up almost as bright as his chariot. Right, because he is the god of the sun and all that jazz, Naruto thought with a roll of his eyes, unknowingly upsetting one of the guards as he entered the castle while another spoke with his sensei. After yet another sewing of the mission scroll, they were allowed to pass and one of the guards led them inside. Believe what you want, you'll soon see the truth of my words once I'm out of this. Oh, that's it. This is just getting ridiculous. Artemis suddenly said mid-sentence as they passed through the main hall and finally arrived at the throne room. Said throne was raised several feet above them, made of a polished gold and bronze with plush red cushions. The reason for the goddess's annoyance, however, was of the young woman currently seated upon the expensive chair. She looked to be in her mid-teens and was wearing a dark pink kimono with white highlights, a small golden necklace with a large sapphire in the middle, and tiny cup-sized crown situated slightly crookedly on her head as she sat slightly slouched. Her hair reached down to her back in long messy locks of gold that gave Naruto's a run for its money, while her eyes were a soft baby blue that held a look of boredom until they locked onto the newcomers. Glancing up at the engraved headbands on their foreheads, a smile crossed her lips and she quickly sat up. "Oh my, you wouldn't happen to be the ninjas I asked for already?" she asked, her voice soft with a slight musical quality to it. "That we are, Princess Momo. I am Asuma and these are two of my students Naruto and Choji," Asuma said as he bowed with Choji following his example while Naruto simply waved tiredly with a big smile, getting the princess to blink in surprise before giggling slightly as Choji pulled her fellow blonde into a bow. "Though most of our group is currently in town finding us a place to stay for the night." "Ah yes, wouldn't want you all sleeping out in the cold after all," Momo said with a nod. "Though I must admit that I am surprised at your presence. My courier said not to expect you for another day at least. I see that the tales of Konoha's high service quality isn't exaggerated as much as I thought." "We do aim to please, Your Highness," Asuma said with a shrug, getting the princess to giggle again. "If it isn't too much of a bother though, would you mind giving us a more detailed explanation of the assignment you've hired us for? The mission request just said you needed help dealing with an overpopulation of turtles." "Of course," Momo said with a nod of her head. "In this country, the turtle is revered for its strong yet peaceful nature. So much so that if we weren't already known as the land of Kinoko, we would certainly be called the land of Kame. It is even a bit of a tradition for families to have at least one turtle living with them in their home. And I'm guessing because of this worship, the turtles were overprotected and ended up breeding out of control?" Asuma asked, only to blink in mild surprise when the princess shook her head. "No, my people are well aware of the possible damage that could be done to our ecosystem from such recklessness after an incident like that 20 years ago. Besides, turtle meat is our second best export," she said with a shrug before returning to proper posture. "Then how did you end up with your current problem?" At this question, Momo sighed deeply while rubbing her forehead. "That would be thanks to one of my more zealous advisors, Kimak," she said in an annoyed tone. "That old goat was obsessed with continuing with the old ways, always ranting on how the gods would have their revenge and such. He only calmed down slightly when I granted him a patch of land on the outskirts of Omocha to act as his own turtle sanctuary a year ago." But Asuma added as the young woman sighed again. "But he went too far. Somehow that fool managed to both collect and breed several thousand turtles on the property in a short time." As she spoke, Momo signaled to a servant across the room who promptly brought a small envelope that he handed to Asuma. Checking its contents, the smoking man let out a low whistle at the series of pictures inside showing literal rivers of turtles waddling across barren ground. "We only found out a week ago, when Kimak passed away from a heart attack and the critters spread out in search of food. My people have been trying to deal with the problem, but there are just too many of them, and it's the middle of harvest season. Limiting your manpower even more and thus leading you to hire us." Asuma finished for the princess, getting her to nod. "Well then, worry no more, Your Highness. Me and my companions will be sure to make short work of this little issue. Though we will apparently have to wait until tomorrow to start," Asuma said with a chuckle as he looked down at Naruto's snoozing form, the whiskered boy's exhaustion having finally caught up to him. "It would appear so," Momo said, a hand rising up to her lips as she giggled at the sight. The next day. 711, 712, 713, 714 Man, there really is no end to these guys, is there? Naruto asked rhetorically as he picked up a small brownish-green turtle with red stripes around its eyes, petting its head while he placed it in the barrel that was strapped to his hip. The midday sun streamed through the leaves of the trees as he hunched over as he trudged through the marshy area he was in. "That they are," Artemis agreed from about 2 feet to his left, scratching at the chain sticking out the back of her neck in mild annoyance, as she swiftly scooped several of the reptiles up at once with the other without stopping, her oddly enough bare feet sinking a bit into the muddy ground. "Why can't I have any regular people as friends?" Tenten wondered as she placed a trio of filled buckets on the back of a tortoise that was half as tall as she was before both vanished in a puff of smoke. After a good night's rest, Guy and Asuma had come up a simple but effective plan to finish the mission. They divvied everyone up into 3 groups, Choji and Ino with Lee, Niji with Guy and Asuma, and Naruto with Tenten. Then, Guy gave both the other groups temporary summon scrolls for his tortoise contract to use to transport the turtles away from their unyouthful doom. When the bun girl questioned why only she was being teamed up with the whiskered blonde, Naruto had reluctantly revealed Artemis's existence with some encouragement from said goddess and his sensei. Naturally, some members of Team 9 Niji refused to believe him at first. At least they did until Naruto created a shadow clone and Artemis possessed it. After recovering from their shock, and staring at the duo for an uncomfortably long time with an active Byakugan, the group reacted accordingly. Guy had patted Naruto on the back, accidentally causing the boy to faceplant with the floor, and yelled something about having doubled the flames of youth, not really affected as he had already known of the boy's condition with doing pretty much the same. Niji had huffed and muttered something about fate and losers before going back to his regular stoicism, though Artemis noted the way he always kept her within his peripherals. Tenten, on the other hand, had simply gained a look of resignation as she realized that yet another person she was to associate with was not as normal as she hoped. Still, at least this beats Guy and Lee's constant youth moments. She thought with a shiver as she grabbed an empty barrel and got back to work. I can see why these guys are such popular pets, Naruto said, smiling as he carefully picked up a baby turtle barely bigger than his thumb was wide. They are kinda cute. Not all of them, Artemis grunted out while holding up an old turtle that was hissing and snapping viciously at her. Better toss that one, he might attack the others, Tenten said, getting a nod from the auburn girl who was moving to do just that when an ominous cracking noise made her and the others freeze. What was they? Naruto's question changed to a scream as the ground under his and Artemis suddenly collapsed, revealing a wide cavernous chamber underneath them. Naruto! Artemis! Tenten cried out in shock as she saw the two sudden vanish into the earth, swiftly followed by heavy crash, a pair of pained cries, and a puff of smoke signaling Artemis's dispelling. Rushing to the edge of the newly formed hole, the bun-haired girl couldn't help but wince at the sight of Naruto's half-buried form. "Oh wow, hey Tenchan, I think I found something," Naruto groaned in pain, but still lucid enough thankfully to take notice of the fact that that cavern wasn't naturally made. Not unless computers, cages, and light fixtures grew underground. "Hold on Naruto." Ilgo signaled the others real Kaike. Tenten shrieked as she unfortunately got too close and the ground also crumbled under her before she could react. Crash. Owl. Sorry. And ended up landing right on Naruto. Why can't I ever have anything I'm doing go like planned? Is that too much to ask for just one time? Naruto wondered as he lay half buried in rock and a certain bun-haired girl currently using his gut as a landing pad. Are you alright Naruto? Tenten asked as she quickly climbed off her orange-garbed companion and began moving the rubble that he was partially buried in. Ugh, been better, Naruto said with a grimace, a small trickle of blood running down the side of his face from a cut on his forehead, while one of his hands weakly held his stomach where the bun-haired girl landed. What about you Artene? Annoyed but fine. The goddess of the hunt said huffed out, not happy about being sent back into her confinement prematurely. Now where in Tartarus are we? That's a good question, Naruto mumbled with a grunt as Tenten pulled him to his feet, and he managed to get a good look at his surroundings. I don't remember annoying creepy underground rooms in the mission description. That's the life of a ninja for you. You should always expect the unexpected, Tenten said, getting Naruto to nod in agreement before they both turned their gazes to the ceiling at least 2 stories above them, or more specifically the hole they had fallen through. The ground is too unstable to go back that way, attempting so would most likely result in a cave-in. We'll have to find another way out, Artemis said through Naruto. Her words were punctuated by an ominous crumbling sounds followed by some small stones and dust falling from above. Alright, I'll send a message to Kyuso. Tenten swore as she reached for the summoning scroll she'd been carrying, only to come up with a useless piece of ripped-up parchment. Looks like we're on our own. Let's look around then. There should be another way out of here cause I'm pretty sure that wasn't the front door, Naruto said while he dusted himself off, getting Tenten to laugh a little before they started to explore. Unfortunately for them, they never noticed the same grumpy turtle Artemis had been holding earlier wiggling helplessly upside down as a fluorescent green liquid from a broken test tube poured all over it. As they looked around the place, all 3 of them kept their guards up in case there was any additional nasty surprises waiting for them. However, it didn't take long for their caution to be subsided by an overwhelming amount of intrigue and curiosity at what they were finding. Several computers were set up all over the place, either displaying large amounts of technical gibberish that none of them could make heads or tails of, or hooked up to large glass containment units that held several different types of reptiles such as lizards, snakes, and of course turtles. At least, some of them held those. The majority contained horribly deformed and disturbingly humanoid-looking and sized creatures or giant eggs as large as a child that were either half-hatched or dissected open to show the monstrosity within. By Kami, who would do something like this? Tenten wondered, shivering as they passed by a particularly disgusting container. Its content looked like a horribly injured man who had 2 tiny hands bursting out of his stomach, a mouth that took up over half the face filled with dozens of jaded teeth, and 2 large limbs sticking out of its back that ended in large bone scythes. I have no idea, and I pretty sure don't want to, Naruto said with a green face as he saw another man whose entire chest cavity, lower jaw, and stomach were missing and had a disfigured snake head for an arm. I'm just glad these things are dead. Each canister had a life support monitor and number ID on the side of it, with every single one flatlined. By Zeus, this place makes Hades' domain look like a spring paradise, Artemis muttered in, utterly horrified at the sick and demented twisting of life. I'm guessing this was Kimak's doing. The princess said he'd been absolutely insistent on having the sanctuary set up and that no one but he go on it. And this just happens to be within the property limit. Tenten finished, getting what the goddess was getting at. He probably used the turtle fanaticism as a ruse to keep this place under wraps. But still, why would he do all of this? Spotting something in the corner of his eye, Naruto turned his head towards the source before pointing. Maybe those will tell us. Looking in the direction he was gesturing to, Tenten found herself looking at a moderately sized alcove where a large workbench that was covered with various notebooks, papers, and a small glass box. That's convenient, too convenient, she said with narrowed eyes while reaching into her weapon pouch and pulling out a trio of kunai. Acting fast, she tossed them at the table before tackling a surprised Naruto behind a container holding a giant lizard with a human face. Thunk, thunk, thunk. Guess it wasn't a trap after all, Tenten said as she lifted head up and looked through the glass to see that nothing had happened at all. That or it has a more complicated trigger mechanism, possible a pressure plate or… Get off. Tenten was broken from her thoughts as she heard Naruto's muffled words under her. Remembering that she was still on top of the him, she glanced down to apologize while getting up and rapidly developed a bright blush on her face. In her rush to avoid the trap she had expected to be triggered, the bun-haired had forgotten the fact that her companion was easily a head shorter than her. So when she tackled him to the ground, the whiskered blonde ended up with an unexpected face full of developing teenage breasts. Must resist dirty thoughts, Naruto repeated in his head desperately with a twitching eyebrow as Tenten quickly climbed off of him, only for his brain to keep replaying the moment, and a small trickle of blood to run down one of his nostrils. Damn it! If it wasn't for the fact I was in here, I would think you were somehow setting these accidents up somehow, Artemis said with a facepalm. Sorry about that, let's just go look at what's on the table, Tenten said awkwardly, quickly changing the subject as she stood up hurried over to the said place. Yeah, sounds good, Naruto said, wiping his nose clean as he got back up and followed after her. Keep a cautious eye out for any possible traps. The duo approached the table where Tenten pulled her kunai free and put them away before they slowly started going through the various different documents and sheets. And boy were the contents unpleasant. Specimen 11, Formula A03. Subject was stable during incubation, but shortly after hatching experienced rapid cellular death and molecular instability that resulted in accelerated aging and organ failure. Further study revealed the cause to be a compatibility failure between the crevice snake and lake gecko DNA. Kabuto-san was most displeased with this but refrained from punishing me this time for my failure. Specimen 67, Formula D52. Subject perished during 3rd week of incubation. Autopsy revealed that the embryotic sac had mutated into a cellular structure similar to the human digestive tract that resulted in the subject being dissolved by the extreme acidity. The cause was revealed to be due to human tissue sample being contaminated with bacterial growth. Need to request new samples during Kabuto-san's next review period. Specimen 294, Formula G10. Subject prematurely hatched during 8th week of incubation due to the unexpected mutation of massive clawed forelimbs. Despite this, the partially developed fetus survived an impressive 2 hours and 35 minutes before perishing. Unable to identify the cause of mutation at this time. Despite this, Kabuto-san was highly pleased with the results during his monthly review. Specimen 300, Formula J117. Subject successfully went through full incubation and survived an astonishing 3 weeks before finally perishing due to sudden respiratory failure. My theory of integrating avian DNA has paid off. Autopsy on the subject revealed the cause of death to simply be the common flu virus as the subject hadn't developed a proper immune system yet. In light of this success, Kabuto-san has requested a fully developed live subject to be transported to the labs in the land of rice paddies. Unknown at this time on how to accomplish this task without breaking cover. With each report they read, the looks of disgust and revulsion on both Naruto and Tenten's faces grew. Whoever wrote these made sure to put down every single detail they could, including how many successful minutes they survived and how violent or gruesome the deaths of the subject was. Putting them aside, Naruto grabbed the glass box with curiosity. It looked just like the rest of the containment chambers, only smaller and more portable version, lacking the aforementioned life monitor, and the number 301 etched hastily on the side. While he was focused on this, Tenten had switched to the journals. Ugh, Artemis was right, Kimak was the one who used this place. He was trying to develop a formula that would give someone the perfect blend of reptilian abilities, she said as she flipped through several pages before pausing on one in particular. Worse yet, he had the support of a hidden village. Though it must be pretty new cause I've never heard of Otogekure or this Kabuto before. When her statement was met with silence, the weapon addict glanced up to see Naruto holding the container up to the light as he looked closely at the perfectly white fist-sized egg that it contained. What is that? Don't know, but whatever it is, it's still alive, Artemis said with narrowed eyes as she and Naruto saw a faint outline of the creature wiggling within its shell prison. And ready to hatch. Okay, I've seen enough horror movies to know how this goes. Do not let that thing out of sight while I seal these up, there is no way we're leaving this. Tenten said with dead seriousness as she pulled out some blank scrolls and ink. Neither Naruto or Artemis argued with her as they kept their eyes firmly on the unusual egg. It only took the brunette a minute or so to seal away the clutter of paperwork and to stuff the finished scrolls into her equipment pouch. In that time, though, the cavern around them shook again, though much more violently than before. Let's get the hell out of here, this place is ready to fall apart, she said, getting a nod from the blonde as he was about to put the box back down only for Tenten to stop him. Keep it, I'd rather not risk whatever it is possibly getting out when this place crumbles. Seeing her point, Naruto tucked the container under his left arm carefully before they both sprinted off. This is what you get for building a base like this under a marshland without any kind of support structure. I can just imagine Athena ranting about the stupidity of it now, Artemis said with a nostalgic sigh as the place shook once more, before shaking her head suddenly with a look of confusion. What in Tartarus? Why do I suddenly feel sad all of a sudden? So lost in her thoughts, she didn't even notice as her host and his partner finally found a way out in the form of a stone staircase built into one of the walls. This in turn led to a large stone wall that held a complex-looking seal that Tenten identified as a user-specific chakra lock while slapping several explosive tags over it, then dragging Naruto behind cover as the papers ignited. Artemis only snapped her from her thoughts when the resulting blast caused her to fall over in her prison with a splash. What the hell was that? She demanded as she got up, ignoring the muffled snickering of the fox behind her as she shook water off of herself. Tenten blasting the exit open, duh. Naruto thought back with a raised eyebrow. How could you have missed that? The seal tightened up a bit, and I was cut off briefly. The moon goddess lied, making Naruto nod in acceptance. The fox tried something? Naruto asked, his mental voice shaking slightly as he spoke of the beast he held. The truth had been revealed to him shortly after Tsunade had diagnosed Artemis, as the third had figured there was a very likely chance that the trapped Olympian would end up telling him about it anyway. The revelation had been pretty hard on the enigmatic blonde, and Naruto had spent several days in an unresponsive state of denial. It had taken Shizen, Irika, and Hiruzen combined efforts to both get him to accept his condition and believe that he wasn't the fox itself turned human, or other such malarkey. Anyway, back to the present, Artemis simply a short yes, before falling silent again as she contemplated her compulsive reaction, though this time making sure to stay aware of her surroundings. Stepping through the still smoking gap that had been created, Naruto and Tenten found themselves inside a small sparsely decorated room with a plain futon, a kitchenette, and a sliding door that had been knocked off its hinges to reveal the marshy outside with hundreds of turtles milling about, and the hillside the building was attached to. Must be the widow's home, Naruto thought as he took a brief glance around, spotting several turtle-based trinkets and such lying around in random places as they walked outside. Let's head back to Omocha, we need to report this to the princess and our senseis right away, Tenten said while patting her equipment pouch. Then what are we standing around here for? Naruto asked rhetorically before jumping up into the canopy and tree-hopping away. Wait for me, the weapon fanatic called after him as she rushed to catch up. After they left, the tremors settled down again and a calm silence filled the area. Birds started to return to their perches, tweeting their songs to each other while the turtles on the forest floor continued to waddle about in search of food. The peace was swiftly shattered again not even a minute later though when yet another quake shook through the area, this time followed with a series of large spiderweb cracks that spread across the earth rapidly. The land then started sinking down as the weight of the earth was no longer able to support itself. Just before it could fully collapse, though, and in turn bury the lab underneath along with its horrific contents, something suddenly burst through the ground. Whatever had done this was mostly from view by the resulting cloud of smoke and dirt, with only a hulking shadow roughly 30 feet tall in view alongside a glowing orange eye full of bloodlust and insanity. Rhea. With Naruto and Tenten. Aya. Both genin stopped in their tracks as the powerful roar reached their ears, making the hair on the back of their necks stand up as a little wave of malice washed over them. Turning around, they were only just able to catch sight of the massive dust cloud that had formed behind them before they were forced to jump out of the way of a massive torrent of fire that completely obliterated everything in its path. Unfortunately, Naruto hadn't managed to react in time to escape unscathed, and his right arm was ever so briefly engulfed by the passing inferno, roasting off the sleeve of his jacket in seconds and scorching the skin underneath. Crying out in agony, the pain caused him to lose focus on his surroundings, and he ended up harshly smashing into the branch he'd been aiming for. The force of the impact snapped the branch with ease, sending him tumbling through the underlying canopy until he hit the muddy ground below with a splat. Then, as if to add insult to injury, just as he slowly lifted his head up to see something massive and reptilian crashing through the incinerated landscape and towards the village, the case he'd been carrying landing on his head with a cracking sound before landing in the mud next to him completely unharmed with its contents intact. Naruto groaned weakly before coughing out a mouthful of mud as he tried to push himself up, only to collapse as a massive amount of pain shot through both his arm and head alongside a heavy wave of nausea. What happened?" he asked with a heavy slur. "You almost got roasted alive and then knocked out," Artemis said in a calm tone, though with no small amount of concern. "I'm channeling as much energy as I can into your injuries to bolster your regeneration, but it's going to take a while. Healing was never specialty." "Thanks Arthine Lust lay here and rest," Naruto mumbled as his eyes started to droop shut, only to flutter back open as something grabbed his uninjured arm and flipped him over. "Oh, thank Kami, I finally found you." "Naruto! Naruto, can you hear me?" a familiar voice asked as a slender hand gently patted his cheek. "Denshan?" Naruto asked back as his blurry vision focused in on the bun-haired girl standing over him. "Yeah, that's right," Tenten said with a small sigh of relief, before grimacing as she took in her companion's condition. His arm was covered in various third and second-degree burns, and an alarming amount of blood covered his head and the ground around it. Thankfully, the burns didn't seem to be too much of an issue as a soft silver glow started to emanate from them before they began to gradually shrink. His head, on the other hand, was much worse, and the weapons specialist visibly recoiled after taking a closer look at the source. There was a visible dent on top of his head, with small bits of bone mixed around with the torn-up flesh. Like the burns, a small amount of Artemis's power, though much more concentrated than around the burns, was seeping into it, gradually repairing the damaged tissue and bone. Shaking off her shock, Tenten reached down and picked Naruto up bridal style, making Naruto hiss out as the movement caused his head to throb and a bit of bile to rise in his throat. "Sorry, Naruto." "It's fine, Tenshan," Naruto said as his head drooped against her chest, his slur a little bit better. "Let SH get going. I think that thing was Hishing for Omocha." "Yeah, it was," Tenten said while turning around and looking at the trail of destruction that had been left in the creature's wake. "Hold on," she told him before they both vanished in a blur of movement. Thanks to Tenten and Artemis's attention focused solely on Naruto's injuries, and the blonde himself too concussed to think of much else, none of them noticed the broken case lying on the ground or the pieces of eggshell and glass that lead to where Naruto had been laying. It took almost 10 minutes of non-stop sprinting for the pair to reach the village, at which point Naruto had recovered enough to stand on his 2 feet. Dropping down at the edge of the woods, both were met with the sight of a giant bipedal turtle with vibrant yellow skin with glowing green veins branching out everywhere. Giant spikes easily as large as a human covered the back of its massive shell, and its beak-like mouth was chock full of razor-sharp teeth that glinted menacingly. Flames and smoke billowed around it as it stomped through Omocha, multiple buildings shaving been crushed, shattered, or set aflame. "Oh, come the fuck on! Now there's a case, damn Bowser?" Artemis yelled, making Naruto flinch as the sheer volume caused his still-present headache to skyrocket. "Dynamic entry!" Guy's voice screamed out as he suddenly shot into the air and struck the now-dubbed Bowser's face with a flying kick, making it stumble back a few steps. At the same time, Asuma zipped around the giant turtle's feet, slashing at every inch he could reach with his now glowing trench knives as he passed. Sadly, either of their attacks did much as the smoking Jonin's blades barely made a scratch in the Bowser's thick hide, and it easily shrugged off Guy's kick. Roaring in anger, it retaliated with a powerful swipe that the beautiful green beast of Konoha barely dodged, leaving the hopefully empty structure he had been standing on to get utterly obliterated. "Whoa! Gah!" Naruto and Tenten exclaimed as they were almost knocked down by the force of the attack, causing the entire area to shake. And it's just as brutally strong, perfect, Artemis said with a grimace. Hey, since you seem to know so much about this thing, how about a way to beat it? Naruto asked as he readied his bow, and Tenten pulled out several kunai. Well, since there isn't a fire flower nearby or a bottomless cliff to trick it into, let me think. Artemis muttered sarcastically. I'd suggest either aiming for the eyes or hitting it with something that makes a really big bang, preferably both if you can manage it. Tenten, you have any more explosive tags? Naruto asked, his response coming in the form of a large stack of red and white papers with the kanji explode on them being handed to him. Thanks. Taking a couple of the deceptively dangerous papers, he drew a plain arrow and wrapped the tags around it while Tenten did the same to her knives. You do know that these will probably only piss that thing off, right? That's the idea, Naruto said while knocking the arrow and lining up his shot, though his normally steady hands were trembling slightly. I was afraid you were going to say that, Tenten muttered with a sigh as she took aim as well. With Guy and Asuma. Kyuso, we aren't even tickling it. Asuma swore as he skidded to a stop beside Guy, his breath coming in short ragged gasps and a bit of blood dripping from his side where a claw had grazed him earlier. This most unyouthful beast is powerful, that is for sure. Guy agreed, his usual boisterous and cheerful attitude replaced with one of complete seriousness. His body was covered in bruises and scratches while his normally tan skin was a deep red with veins bulging visibly and a greenish aura surrounded his body, a sign that he was using his signature technique, the 8 celestial gates. But we must not let that stop us, we need to at least hold it off long enough for our youthful students to get the civilians clear. Their original plan when the monster had shown up was for the two to keep it distracted while their students got the civilians to safety so that the Jonin could really let loose. This proved easier said than done, however, as the giant turtle was soon to reveal that it had not only an extremely high durability, but also an immense amount of strength to back it up, and a startling amount of speed for a creature of its bulk. I'm open to suggestions, Asuma said, getting ready to move again when his ears picked up a soft but familiar whistling sound. Wait, isn't that? Before he could complete his thought, an arrow and several kunai flew into sight. Sailing through the air, they struck against the beast's head and exploding, with the kunai hitting the skin covering its ear canal and the arrow hitting just below the left eye. Rah! Roaring angrily, Bowser and the two Jonin whipped their heads towards the direction the projectiles came from to see Naruto and Tenten, who were quickly booking it. Oh, thank Kami, they're all right. The men thought with relief, having been worried sick about the missing trio including Artemis, ever since they didn't return to town on the agreed-upon time. That worry had only increased tenfold after the monstrosity they were fighting arrived from the same zone they had been assigned to. Their relief was only short-lived, however, as Bowser roared again before turning around fully and charging. Okay, we pissed it off. Now what? Tenten asked nervously as the beast started bearing down on them. We keep it distracted until we find a way to beat it, Tajukage Bunshin no Jutsu. Hundreds of clones puffed into existence around the pair, each one giving a loud battle cry before they charged towards Bowser. Naruto moved to join them, only for his body to suddenly seize up, making him start to collapse until Tenten caught him. What do you think you're doing? Artemis demanded as she used all of what little control she had to briefly stop Naruto from moving. Helping stop the giant turtle from destroying everything. Naruto thought with confusion as he tried to wrest back control of his body, which was much harder than it normally was as his headache made it difficult to concentrate. By blindly charging at it in your state. You can barely walk straight right now, by Zeus it's a miracle you are walking at all. Not to mention your aim is almost completely shot. Artemis said, sweat dripping down her forehead as many chains burst from the ground and restrained her, severing her control. I'm fine, Ardine, Naruto told her as he stood back up. Trust me, I won't do anything too stupid. That statement does not fill me with any confidence. Naruto didn't respond as he tuned back into the real world, and saw that already almost all of his clones had been destroyed already. Shrugging off the concerned look that Tenten was giving him, Naruto made more clones, but instead charging like their predecessors had the copies of the whiskered blonde readied their bows and fired as many arrows as possible at Bowser. Most did nothing more than bounce or shatter harmlessly upon impact, but a few managed to dig into the softer patches of skin around the neck and joints while spools upon spools of ninja wire unraveled all over it. While nowhere near strong enough to stop Bowser, they did manage to trip it up some, thus slowing it down long enough for Naruto and Tenten to get the hell out of dodge. Sprinting around it as it struggled with the metal cables, they made it about halfway around before being cut off by Asuma. Naruto, Tenten, glad to see you two are okay-ish. The smoker said, trailing off a little when he got a closer look at their battered forms, mostly Naruto's still healing arm and blood/mud-stained head. You too, and Tatsu-sensei, Naruto said with a quick joking salute. Where's everyone else? Yuelith! Guy screamed as he hit Bowser with a devastating uppercut that sent the off-balance turtle tumbling over with a heavy thud, inadvertently crushing the remaining clones underneath it. They're still in the village evacuating the civvies. You two go help them while me and Guy deal with this thing, Asuma said. But Tatsu-sensei, we can help with the Bowser, Naruto argued, earning himself a pair of weird looks from the man and Tenten for the name. Ardine called it that. Look, Naruto, now isn't the time for this. I am your leader and ordering you to help with the evac. Am I clear? Asuma said sternly with a glare that made Naruto recoil before drooping his head in acceptance. Yes, sensei, he mumbled before sprinting off towards Omocha with Tenten. Waiting until they were out of hearing range, Asuma sighed slightly with a frown. He didn't like acting harsh like that, but it was necessary as he didn't want any of his students to get hurt by trying to take on something that was clearly out of their league. Gah! Crash. Speaking of which, Asuma hopped out of the way as his fellow Jonin crashed into the spot he had been standing when Bowser managed to get a lucky hit on him. You alright, Guy? Yash, for such an unyouthful creature it certainly packs a most youthful punch. I'll take that as a yes. With Naruto and Tenten. Arriving at the destroyed part of the village, Naruto once again spammed out several clones which began scouring the whole place for anyone. I'll meet up with the others and keep looking with your clones. You check the castle and make sure Princess Momo is alright, Tenten said, getting a nod from the whiskered blonde before they split up. Smart girl, Artemis thought, easily seeing Tenten's underlying reasoning. The castle was the farthest place from the fight, and the naturally most fortified, meaning it would be the safest place to be at the moment. She was getting Naruto somewhere safe under the guise of helping the princess. Definitely need to recruit her once I'm out of these chains. Sorry, Naruto, Tenten thought, feeling bad for tricking the boy, but even with how fast he was healing, she was certain he was in no state to fight properly. Especially after that weird seizure he had a minute ago. Unaware of either of the two girls' thoughts, Naruto continued to make a beeline towards the castle by rooftop. It took him almost 5 minutes to get there, mostly because he ended up stumbling a few times due to the pain in his head and arm flaring. Leaping over the gates with ease, he zipped around the panicking guards and through the front door. He then ran down the main hall until he reached the throne room where a scared and concerned-looking Momo sat on her throne surrounded by guards. Momoheim! What are you doing? You should be getting out of here. Trust me, Naruto-san, I would like nothing more than to leave. Momo's voice shook slightly with nervousness, and her hands gripped her throne's armrests so tightly her knuckles were white. Unfortunately, my military advisor has other ideas, she said while giving the man standing next to her, an elderly fellow with graying brown hair, a handlebar mustache, a military tux, and a cane with a brown spotted mushroom handle, a dirty look. With all due respect, Your Highness, the castle is the safest possible place you can be, the man said with utmost certainty in his voice. It has withstood hundreds of invasions in the past, and it will withstand 100 more. What are you doing? He demanded when Naruto suddenly walked right up to Momo and scooped her up into a bridal carry. Getting Momoheim to safety before it's too late. Naruto trailed off as the ground started shaking and a shadow started rising over the room. Slowly looking towards the giant stained glass window, Naruto's eyes widened in shock before he tightened his grip on the princess and leapt straight over the guards towards the exit. Play Bowser theme, whichever version you prefer. He wasn't a moment too soon, as not even a second later Bowser's arm burst through the roof and tore out an entire section. Huge chunks of stone fell, killing or injuring many of the guards, with Momo turning completely pale as a particularly large piece squashed both her throne and military advisor. What the fuck? I thought Asuma-sensei and super bushy brows were dealing with that thing, Naruto yelled mentally as he hopped around several more times to avoid more falling debris. They're trying to look, Artemis said while mentally nudging Naruto's eyes to the side where he could see Guy and Asuma attacking with everything they had, only to be blatantly ignored as Bowser kept attacking the castle. I don't get it, why is it so focused on the castle? Naruto asked, stumbling back a bit as a chandelier crashed down in front of him. I don't know, I've only seen animals or monsters act like this. When Artemis paused as Bowser sniffed the air and swiveled its head to look right at them. When they were chasing down their prey. Naruto. Move. Now. Kyuso. Naruto swore as he barely managed to leap out of the way as a torrent of fire ripped through the space he had just been occupying. By Kami Daimao Kuppa. I thought he was just a myth, Momo muttered in shock, making Naruto glance at her briefly before focusing back on Bowser, as he dodged a wild swing that took out another section of the castle. Ardine, what the hell is going on? You're being hunted, that's what. I got that. I meant why? Naruto thought while moving to an undamaged section of the castle for cover. It's a predator you pissed off a lot, why wouldn't it be hunting you? Also, incoming on your rear. As soon as he heard this, Naruto leapt to the top of a nearby staircase and spun around, only for his jaw to drop at what he saw. Oh come on! It can spit fucking lava! Sure enough, down below Bowser's head could be seen sticking through the wall with red-hot molten rocks spraying out of its mouth. Said head snapped to his position right after he spoke, forcing Naruto to jump out of the way as a stream of lava narrowly missed him and his screaming passenger. That's it, no more of this crap. Finding another hiding spot, Naruto made a single shadow clone and handed Momo over to it. Get her to safety, now! Hi boss, the clone said before running towards the main entrance while the original prepared his bow. Aren't you worried that Bowser will try and attack them? No, I think it can tell me apart from the clones otherwise. It would still be attacking the clones that are running all over the village. Artemis finished, nodding her head at the logic since both she and Naruto could still feel the heavy pull on his chakra reserves signifying that his clones were still active. So what now? Nothing you've done has done anything more than pissing it off, hence why we're in this situation. You're going to wing it, aren't you? You know me too well, Nei-chan, Naruto said while quickly knocking an explosive tag arrow. Popping out around the corner, he fired at Bowser's eye again while running to another section of the castle. Sadly, while the shot was on target, the massive turtle's head moved at the last second and the projectile exploded harmlessly against its beaked maw as it continued to spew lava at him. Undeterred, Naruto continued to run, jump, hop, flip, and just about every other acrobatic maneuver you can think of that helped him avoid getting roasted, sliced, smashed, or melted. All the while, he continued to try and fail at hitting Bowser's eyes. Meanwhile, outside the castle, Guy and Asuma were forced to back off as all the excess lava started flowing outwards, rapidly covering the grounds and preventing them from getting close. On the plus side, Naruto's clone had managed to get the princess to safety, as he had managed to get a glimpse of it handing her to his sensei before dispelling. Naruto, this isn't working. Yeah, I noticed, Naruto grumbled while rolling behind a chunk of stone just as a massive column of fire filled the area. That's why I'm going to try something really stupid. Of course you are. Do you have a better idea? Naruto asked, his voice just a touch snarky but also a bit desperate. When he was met with silence though, he just sighed heavily while knocking his last arrow. I didn't think so. Waiting for the flames to die down, Naruto took several deep breaths to steady his heartbeat before standing up and walking out from cover. When Bowser spotted him, he stopped and raised his bow. Naruto, please tell me you aren't trying to play chicken with a several-ton lava-spitting turtle. Naruto didn't respond as he kept his focus firmly on Bowser as it opened its mouth wide to reveal the lava bubbling up in its throat, before giving off a gurgling roar as it spat out the molten rock in a condensed stream. Despite this, the whiskered blonde didn't move an inch, watching as the lava streaked towards him at high speed. Naruto, Artemis said nervously as the lava got closer and Naruto still didn't move. Naruto! Finally, when the scorching was mere feet away from him, Naruto reacted. Jumping to the side at the last second, he bit down the urge to yelp as the lava missed him by a mere inch, the heat alone causing his exposed skin to start blistering. Ignoring this as best he could, he quickly realigned his shot and fired. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow down as the arrow started to fly through the air, sailing towards its objective. Briefly blinded by the glare of its own attack, Bowser never saw the projectile coming until it was too late. Squelch boom. Greya ah! A scream of rage and pain burst from Bowser's throat as it clutched the gaping hole that used to be its eye, its red. Stop music. Naruto smirked at this for a moment before pausing as he heard a crackling sound. Confused, he looked down towards the source and froze when he saw his bow. While most of the weapon looked fine, the bottom of the lower limb was blacked and shattered, having been scorched from the lava as it passed and snapping from the stress of firing. Gently grasping the small segment still dangling from the string, he felt his heart ache as the charred wood crumbled apart between his fingers. Staring at the ashen remains in his hand, tears quickly to build up in his eyes and threatened to fall. Naruto, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Artemis murmured softly, not knowing what else to say. Don't be, Naruto said as his hand closed into a fist, the remains of his bow groaned as his grip on them tightened. It wasn't your fault. Play, animal I've become by 3 days' grace. It's his, he said while glared at Bowser as he howled in agony. And he is going to pay for it. Within the seal, Artemis was trying to think of a way to console her host when she blinked as she felt a sudden invigorating and draining sensation. Looking at herself, she was shocked to see her whole body glowing a bright silver as a lot more of her power than normal was being drawn away. Looking behind herself, she saw that her bindings were also glowing, only this time a dark red signifying the power of the Kyuubi as it was being forced into her. Meanwhile, back in the real world, Naruto started to gain a soft silver glow around his form, not that he noticed as he was blinded by his anger. Naruto, I know you're upset, but you need to calm down, and you're not listening to me, Artemis said with a sigh as her host charged at the giant turtle. Moving at speeds much faster than he normally does, it only took the whiskered teen a few seconds to reach the beast's legs. He then used his chakra to stick to Bowser's leg, quickly scaling his way up the thrashing turtle's side and up to its head. Too focused on the searing pain of having its eye socket blown apart, Bowser didn't even notice its unwanted passenger until they were literally staring eye to eye. If you think that hurt, then you're going to hate this. With rage-filled silver eyes, Naruto raised up his broken bow like a spear and promptly stabbed it as deep as he could into the until recently uninjured eye. Grah! Bowser stumbled back several steps howling in pure agony while blindly swiping at its face, managing to scratch both itself and Naruto's back several times before it tripped over a large chunk of the castle it had torn off. As it fell, Naruto summoned the dancing lunar blades and proceeded to hack, slash, and stab everything in reach all the way down. Aog squelch Garagul. Coincidentally, the place Bowser fell was directly over a church which had a large metal sun statue on top that pierced right through the back of the monster's head and erupted out of its mouth and forehead in a shower of greenish-red blood. And music. Bowser's once mighty roars were reduced to a pathetic gurgling as it thrashed around in a desperate attempt to get back up, to no avail. As each second passed, its struggling got weaker and weaker until eventually it fell still entirely. After a whole minute of not moving, Naruto slowly stood up and dispelled his daggers before reaching down and pulling out the remains of his weapon with a sharp tug, his breath coming in long ragged puffs. Limping over to the edge of the beast's head, he sloppily hopped down and ended up fall flat on his scratched-up back. Ow. Congratulations, you just took down a giant mutated monster turtle basically single-handedly. How do you feel? Artemis asked sarcastically, though with a strong hint of concern mixed in. Peachy, Naruto said tiredly as he stayed sprawled out across the ground. Good, then you can deal with the thing that just slithered onto your chest. Say what now? Naruto mumbled as he lifted his head up. And promptly had his jaw fall straight back down as he saw, am I hallucinating or is there a chibi snake lady on my chest? Turns out he wasn't hallucinating. It had been a day since the turtle monster attacked Omocha and Naruto could be found lying on a luxurious king-sized bed with a bored expression on his face. Several bandages covered his bare torso, his entire right arm, and a good portion of his head. The chibi snake lady, or Alamia as Artemis said her kind was called, was still on his chest. She was roughly 1.5 feet long / tall, with 2/3 of her body consisting of a black and yellow snake tail that ended at the hips. Not only that, but a pair of small gray wings attached to her shoulder blades, each one about 1 inch big and covered in soft down feathers. Past that, she looked almost entirely human with soft peach skin, long black hair that reached a few centimeters past her shoulders, and bright amber eyes. She looked to be about 7 to 8 years old with slightly chubby cheeks and somewhat pudgy physique, only made more apparent with the cute blue dress she was wearing. She was currently sitting just above where his heart was, her tail curled up messily around her as she watched a cartoon on the TV in front of the bed. Ever since she'd first revealed herself, the tiny snake girl spent most of her time in that spot, with the only exceptions being to go to the bathroom, eating, when he moved, or if someone moved her. Like when his comrades had first found him after he slew Bowser. To say it was an awkward first meeting would be an understatement. The day before. I can't believe Naruto took that thing down by himself, Ino muttered as she kept glancing at the mutated turtle's corpse. It had only been 5 minutes since its death, and yet it was somehow already badly decayed as its rotting flesh started falling apart. I saw it with my own eyes, yet I still can't believe it. She knew Naruto was much more skilled than she'd given him credit for before graduation, but seriously. How did he go barely win a spar in class to toppling giant 100-foot monsters in just a few months? I know what you mean, Guy-sensei and Asuma-san barely even scratched it. Tenten said as helped the gossip queen move some rubble that they'd seen a glimpse of orange under, only to groan when it was just a broken store sign. She was having just as much difficulty understanding how Naruto managed something that both their senseis couldn't. However, unlike Ino, whose confusion was towards Naruto's skills, her disbelieving thoughts were focused on the boy's condition. He was still recovering from head injury and third-degree burns when they'd separated after all. He probably just got lucky is all, Niji said with a scoff as he landed beside them with his usual stoic expression on his face. There is no other explanation for one destined to failure, Lee. Niji, this is so not the time for your fate crap, Tenten cut him off, stunning the pale-eyed boy briefly. I can normally stand it when we're training and such, but right now we are in the middle of a mission. Not only that, but we just got attacked by a giant fire-breathing turtle and now a squad mate is MIA, possibly Kia. So, if you'd please, shut up and keep looking or I swear I'll find out exactly how many of my weapons I can fit up your ass. Caught off guard by his teammates' actions, Niji instinctually backed up a few steps before catching himself. Shaking his head slightly, he quickly recomposed himself and offered back a bland expression. Fine, whatever, he said emotionlessly while walking off to look around Bowser's left leg. Watching him leave with a raised eyebrow, Ino turned back to Tenten and asked, is he always so pessimistic? If by pessimistic you mean complete ass, then yes, he is. Tenten huffed angrily while going the exact opposite direction with the blonde girl in tow. Even in the academy, it was always fate this and destiny that. I can't believe I used to have a crush on him. Seriously, you had the hots for him? Ino asked curiously, getting a short nod in response. What did you even see in him? It was just a typical schoolgirl crush. He was the best in class, looked cute, had that high and mighty attitude of his that made him seem cool. Tenten said, rolling her eyes as she listed off her reasoning for liking Niji while making sure to pay attention to her surroundings for any sign of Naruto. Once I started spending more time with him as a teammate and had to deal with his cool attitude all day, however, his appeal quickly dried up. Oh, I guess that makes sense, Ino said with a nod as a look of contemplation appeared on her face. That sounds a lot like why I like SAS-. Naruto. Her thoughts were cut off by Tenten's shout as the bun-haired girl shot off ahead. Following the direction the girl went, Ino's eyes widened as she saw the missing whiskered blonde lying on the ground not far from Bowser's head, large scratches covering his body and his broken blood-soaked bow lying next to him. She started to rush to his side as well, but was stopped halfway there when a hand suddenly grabbed her shoulder, stopping her on the spot. EMPH. Another hand clapped over her mouth, muffling the startled cry that escaped her lips. Eyes snapping towards the owner of the hands, Ino's surprise swiftly turned to confusion as she found that it was none other than Asuma who stopping her. Guy stood a few feet away holding an equally confused Tenten with Lee and Choji behind him. Removing the hand from her shoulder, he raised it up to his lips and made a shushing motion before pointing to Naruto. Getting the hint, Ino kept quiet as she turned back to the down-whiskered blonde, her eyes bugging out of their sockets as she finally noticed his little hitchhiker staring back at her with a tilted head. What the hell is that thing? She whisper-yelled after pulling the hand off her face. Most likely another escaped experiment. Asuma whispered back, all of them having been informed earlier by Tenten about the lab that she and Naruto had stumbled upon. Speaking of which, Tenten, didn't you say you two had taken one? Yeah, an egg, but it was destroyed when that thing first attacked us. The weapons girl said once Guy let her go, gesturing towards Bowser's head as she spoke. At least, I thought it had been. Well, now we know better. Asuma sighed while rubbing his beard in thought. So what do we do, sensei? Choji asked as he nervously chomped on a bag of chips. I don't know. Hey, not to rush anyone or something, but could you guys stop whispering crap to and help me? I'm bleeding out here and I just lost feeling in my legs. Naruto groaned out as he slowly lifted his head up to glare at the whispering group. Sorry, Naruto, but we can't risk getting close until we know if that thing on your chest is dangerous to either you or us. Asuma called out. Now don't move, I've dealt with snakes before and they don't like sudden movement. How the hell could she be dangerous? Naruto asked dully as he sat up as best he could despite everyone quietly yelling at him not to, and gently grabbed the snake girl around the waist with his good hand. I mean, look at her, she's so tiny and doesn't even have teeth. Much to everyone else's surprise, the Lamia did absolutely nothing in response to the manhandling other than look at the whiskered blonde curiously with a soft hum and curl her tail around his forearm. After waiting a few more moments and still not seeing any hostility, Asuma gradually approached his downed student. Kneeling beside the bleeding blonde, he reached out and cautiously reached out for the snake girl. Grabbing her by the scruff of the neck like one would a venomous serpent, Asuma gently prized her out of Naruto's grasp, once again receiving no reaction other than her tail curling around his arm once it came free and another hum. Back to the present. The cause for her behavior would later be revealed after the smoker went through the files that Tenten had sealed up. As it turned out, the Lamia, that Naruto had named T-Sho, soft singer, due to her humming, had been genetically engineered to be extremely docile and submissive in order to be the perfect test subject. A task made rather easy since the DNA used in Taisho's creation, other than human of course, were that of a garter snake and a pigeon. With everything pointing to the little Lamia being harmless, Asuma and Guy made the decision to give her the benefit of the doubt and let her stay with Naruto, whom she'd apparently imprinted on as her parent due to her avian DNA. This choice was rather well received by the rest of the genin, with Ino and Tenten finding little Tisho to be quite adorable. The gossip queen of the duo was even the one who refitted the dress Tisho was wearing from a doll. Choji helped prepare food she could eat since she truly didn't have any teeth yet, though they did look to be growing. Thankfully, other than a preference for slightly undercooked meat, her diet was roughly the same as a human. Lee had been his usual enthusiastic self and happily welcomed her amongst their group. Niji just didn't care, enough said. And now we're back to Naruto laying in bed, recovering from the plethora of injuries he'd gotten from, as Asuma put it, his absolutely craziest and stupidest stunt he'd ever pulled. The luxuriousness of his room was because he was currently inside one of the royal suites of Omocha's finest inn, the Golden Truffle, courtesy of Princess Momo herself, who was staying there as well until her castle was rebuilt. However, no matter how nice the accommodations were, they did little to stop Naruto's rapidly mounting boredom. Not even the TV helped, since all that was playing were educational cartoons for Tisho since she was only a day old and had a lot to learn. Of course, even if he could do anything, the whiskered blonde wasn't sure he'd want to, as the loss of his bow was still hitting him hard. Glancing over at a corner, his chest clenched slightly as he once again saw the broken weapon laying across a desk, the blood and viscera cleaned off but the damage still clear as day. His teammates, and Team 9-Niji had given him their condolences for its destruction and had even offered to help him get a new one, but it was sadly clear that none of them truly understood how much his bow truly meant to him. Not even Tenten, as while she cared for her weapons, her style of fighting often led to them breaking on a regular basis. It wasn't just his primary weapon, it was the proof of his success under Artemis's instruction. The first thing she had him do before teaching him was make that bow, something that had taken weeks of hard work and multiple failed attempts. The tedious process of finding the right wood for the body of the bow, debarking, treating, carving, and finally stringing had left Naruto on the brink of total frustration many times before he finally got it right. It was from that bow that he'd fired his first shot, which still brought him and Artemis laughs, gotten his first bullseye, ended up becoming friends with Hinata, and passed the true genin exam. It was such an integral piece of who he was now that losing it was like killing a part of himself. That was why he never even named it. It was as pointless to him as giving a name to his arm or leg. The worst part, though, was no matter how much he wanted to hold all the blame towards Bowser, Naruto knew that it was just as much his fault due to his reckless actions. Artemis did what she could to support him, being one of the two people, the other being Asuma, who could really sympathize with him as she held her own bow in a similar regard, hence why she refused to even let him touch it, unlike the dancing lunar blades. Unfortunately, she'd never been particularly good at emotional support. Ever since the incident with Orion so many years ago, Artemis had always kept herself from getting too attached to others. This even included her own hunters, whom she'd instead taught to rely on each other for such things. Artemis would have done the same here, but the problem was that was the physical link to Naruto's soul created by the chains binding her. Because of this, she felt his every emotion, heard his every thought, spent every second of every day with him. There was literally no way she couldn't become attached. However, despite her inexperience in the field, Naruto greatly appreciated her attempts and had hugged her inside his mindscape as thanks, then promptly promised not to tell anyone on her insistence, aka threats of unending pain. "Okay, that's it. I'm going for a walk," Naruto said, lifting Tisho off his chest as he sat up and placing her on a nearby pillow, having reached the limit to how long he could sit around doing nothing. "As long as it's only a walk," Artemis told him strictly, getting the blonde to grumble quietly but nod in agreement. Yeah, Tisho, stay here, I'll be back in a bit," he said while scooching to the edge of the bed and standing up with a small hiss. I hope that means she understood," Naruto muttered, his eyes flickering to the Lamia as she continued to stare at the TV before grabbing his jacket from a nearby chair and walking out of the room with a slight limp. Crossing through the equally posh and thankfully empty living room, he headed straight for the front door. Just as he was reaching for the doorknob, though, Naruto jumped in surprise as loud knocking echoed from the slab of mahogany. Opening the door, his eyebrow rose in confusion as he saw one of the royal guards bowing to him. "My apologies for the intrusion, Naruto-sama, but Her Highness Momo-sama has requested that you join her for lunch in her suite." Alright then, I'll head right over. Thanks for the heads up," Naruto said with an awkward smile as the guard bowed again and left. "I am never going to get used to that." For a boy who grew up ostracized and downgraded by almost all his peers, The sheer amount of respect and admiration the people of Omocha were showing him was overwhelming. Shutting and locking the door behind him, Naruto walked down the long hallway until he reached the princess's room, marked by the two men standing guard in front the door. Hey, Momo-chan wanted to. The guards immediately moved to the sides and the left one opened the door for him. See me? Sweat dropping slightly as he stepped past the two men, the whiskered boy's gaze swept across the room, which was identical to his group's, until they settled on Princess Momo. She was seated at the dining table wearing a more casual and less puffy version of her usual dress. Naruto-kun, I'm so glad you could make it, Momo said with a bright smile forming on her lips as soon as she saw him. Despite hearing that you were mostly recovered, I was worried that you'd be unable to come due to your injuries. No problem, Momo-chan, I've always healed fast. Besides, I may not be the sharpest kunai in the pouch, but it would be pretty stupid of me to ignore a princess's request, especially one as pretty as you, Naruto said innocently with a grin, missing the light blush that appeared on the princess's cheeks at his words. Fair enough, please have a seat, Momo said while gesturing to the open chair next to her. Actually, it was the only chair open as all the others sans the one she was sitting on were oddly missing. Of course, Naruto thought nothing of this as he happily plopped down next to the girl and started to marvel at the large spread before them. There were regular dishes like onigiri and tempura, local delicacies such as roasted truffles and turtle soup, and several desserts such as dango, crepe, and pocky. To top it all off, a simple but delectable-looking cake sat in the middle, made with white, yellow, and pink frosting. I wasn't sure what you'd like, so I had the chefs bring up a little of everything, Momo told him, giggling a little as she saw the small trail of drool slowly dripping from his lips. Looks like I made the right choice. Snapping out of his little trance at the sound of her laugh, Naruto smiled sheepishly while quickly wiping his mouth. You could have just asked? But then it wouldn't have been a surprise, Momo said as she started serving herself. Oh wait, surprise for who? Naruto asked with a tilted head. For you, silly, the princess said, giggling again at the cute baffled look on his face. You saved not only my country and my people, but my very life. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you, so I had to thank you somehow. Well, I did, but it was because of me that you were in danger in the first place, and that your castle was destroyed and a lot of your soldiers were killed, Naruto muttered sadly, guilt flowing through him as he thought of the good men and women who died during the assault on the castle. Before he could wallow in those dark thoughts for long, though, he was brought back to the present by Momo's hand cupping his cheek and turning his head to face her. That wasn't your fault, there was no way you could have known that would happen, she said while gently rubbing his whisker-like birthmarks with her thumb. Besides, if anyone is to blame, it would be my stupid stubborn ex-advisor for not letting me evacuate the castle when we had the chance. Yeah, but Naruto tried to argue only for the princess's hand to move over his lips. Even my bravest and most loyal guards fled in terror at the mere sight of that beast. Yet you faced him all by yourself while injured and exhausted without even an ounce of hesitation, just so that I could get to safety, Momo continued. Never in my life have I ever seen such courage and selflessness. Naruto flushed slightly from all the praise he was getting, and at the same time Artemis groaned. Oh chaos, I know where this is going. What are you talking about, Artene? Where is this going? Naruto asked the goddess in confusion, only to get no response other than unintelligible grumbles before he returned his attention back to the princess. So please accept this meal, it is the least I could do to repay you for everything you've done, Momo said while placing a filled plate in front of him. Not knowing what else to say, Naruto nodded in defeated acceptance and picked up his chopsticks. Itadakimasu, he said while grabbing a piece of onigiri and popping it into his mouth, the princess doing the same only with some sushi. So how are your people doing? He asked after a few minutes of somewhat awkward silence. Good, there were thankfully very few casualties and those who've lost their houses are being taken in by neighbors or inns until we can rebuild their homes. That's good, any idea what you're going to do about Bowser's body? Yes actually, Momo said while pouring herself a cup of tea. Once the last of the flesh is cleared off, its bones are going to be turned into Kanoko's newest tourist attraction. I'm hoping that it'll help make up the income lost. During Bowser's rampage, the mutated turtle had